The Linux Action Show is created by Jupiter Broadcasting. It's sponsored by Ting. Go to last.ting.com to save off your first device or plan, and DigitalOcean. Go over to digitalocean.com and use our promo code LASTDigital, and then you can spin up your own Linux rig for free. Welcome to Linux Action Show, episode 402. Holy smokes! My name is Chris.
My name is Noah.
Hey, Noah. Good morning to you. Guess what? Big show today. Huge show today. In fact, it's only so big because SCALE14 was massive. Hell of a show, one of the biggest Linux events in the world. And we got some great stories, a tour of the floor, some of the best speakers, and all of that in today's episode. Stay tuned. It's going to be a great show. And plus, on top of that, we got the news coming up in the news segment this month. Hey, come on, stop telegramming us. We're in the middle of doing a show. Coming up on the news segment this week, did you hear about this horrible Trojan that's taking over your Linux box, turning on your microphone, and taking pictures, screenshots? Probably not, because you run Linux. You're not actually at any risk, but the news would have you think so. We'll tell you about it anyways. It's actually a pretty interesting hack that's starting to target the Linux desktop. Mint's going to make their own applications. What could go wrong there? We'll tell you about that. And our favorite live streaming software has a big update, and I'm going to tell Noah about some of the improvements and see if he thinks it's going to make a change for our workflow. And then towards the end of the news segment, do you know about KDE Neon? If you're at the FOSDEM conference, you do. KDE Neon is something that's very exciting being put on by the former head of Kubuntu. We're going to tell you about that. Plus, we have the feedback segment. You'll find out what actually happened to Noah's face. But before all of that, Noah, you know what we got?
The picks.
Yeah, we got the picks. And our Runs Linux this week came from an audience member submission at Scale. An in-person Runs Linux. We're
sitting there eating lunch, and in the middle of my Nashville hot chicken that tasted nothing like Nashville hot chicken, he tapped me on the back and said, look, and hands his tablet to me, and here is a video of his Runs Linux, which was incredible to anyone that likes the N64. And so immediately I hand it to Chris, and I'm like, Chris, check this out. And of course, Chris says, well, you got to send that to the show. We're going to use it. And he's like, you guys really use it? We're like, yeah, we'd use it. It'll be on next week if you give it to us.
Yeah, so he got Linux running on the Nintendo 64, and what's I think maybe the most interesting thing about this story isn't, I mean, some of you are going to go, of course, Linux runs on everything. Yeah, you think about this, no serial port, no networking, no nothing, no device drivers. I think he said it was a 64-bit MIPS CPU, and he had to basically handwrite the drivers from scratch for this thing. He had never written a Linux device driver in his life beforehand. He started from completely scratch on how to build device drivers, how to hack a console like this, and by the end of it, he had Linux booting on the thing. Now, he's still working out a few kinks, but he's gotten even further. So part of the problem is right now, he's in the process of paring down the kernel because turns out N64 doesn't have a lot of RAM. So he's working on getting the kernel down to about 8 megabytes to get it to boot, and that's his current endeavor. Pretty interesting, huh, Noah?
You would have thought that Nintendo could have had the foresight that somebody might want to boot Linux on that darn thing at a later date.
Of course, they should have. You know what I'm still hoping for one day is Nintendo just making great games for my phone. But anyways, before I get to that, in the meantime, until I have Mario on my tablet and Mario on my Roku, whatever, we all have Mario on our desktops. There is Mupen 64 Plus. You might be familiar with this if you're into this thing, but if you've never heard of it before, guess what? There's a Nintendo emulator out there, runs under Linux, and you can go get it up on GitHub right now. Version 2.5 is the current version. I don't know if they've done a release, but they're still alive. Like, after they were originally hosted on Google Code, and then when Google Code shut down, they made the jump over to GitHub, and they've been making some improvements since then. So you can run Nintendo 64 games on your Linux box.
Didn't we do an episode about this?
I think we have. I don't think we mentioned this particular project. So I thought, either way, it's kind of a good time to re-mention it because it fits in with the Runs Linux. This is actually something that my kids have gotten into. Have you ever actually tried any of these retro games with your kids?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, right the week that we were doing the Nintendo episode, I downloaded, I took my cartridge and
backed it up. Yep.
The GoldenEye, and so I got little Noah because he's into Counter-Strike, and I thought, well, this is the Counter-Strike of my day, and so we put it on a laptop, and I bought one of those little USB to real N64 control adapter things, which by the way works flawlessly under Linux.
Cool.
And so sat there and we sat there and played GoldenEye, and then eventually we ended up, just for the novelty of it, we ended up buying an actual N64 off of eBay. Just it was fun.
It is fun.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some really, really great games, and that's mind-numbing entertainment for sure.
So anyways, it was a great story. And if you know of any hacks like this that you've done or somebody else you know, you don't have to wait to tell us in person. Just email the show, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click the contact link, and choose Linux Action Show from the drop dizzle. That's what the kids call the drop down. It's a thing, Noah. So yeah, how you doing? Did you have a horrible week, Noah? How you feeling?
It's been a really rough week. It's amazing. It's like every day I wake up and something else has broken or something else has gone wrong. And the good news is, because I work in the Linux world, a lot of it relates to show content. And so I've been telling myself all week, my consolation has been,
at least it's content.
That's going to cost me a couple grand, but hey, at least I'll have something to talk about.
I think the most interesting story is the Band-Aid on the forehead, and why we may never be able to go to another scale again thanks to the fight that Noah got in, but we'll tell you about that later on in the show. I know that this week you had a proprietary software story that is sort of follow-up to the show. It's a service we've talked about before, and we always are very hesitant to ever recommend something that has proprietary back end, but every now and then it comes up on the show, and it kind of came back and bit you, didn't it?
2009 we started, and one of the things that we knew we were going to need to be able to do to function as an IT support company was provide support over the internet without actually being on site. So we looked at a host of different solutions, and what we settled on was Screen Connect. The reason was it didn't require any configuration at the router or firewall or security gateway or edge device level. It would all transition automatically through NAT. And all the user had to do was visit a website. So we'd send them to, support.altispeed.com. They'd click on our technicians could create a session. They would type in that session key, and we'd be connected to their machine. And the cost was $300, lifetime. You bought it right out, and you got a little code that you put in, and then supposedly you copied that software license in. And I thought, well, even though it's proprietary, it's not a monthly ransom. A subscription. It's a one-time fee. I buy it one time, which is a bazillion times cheaper than the BombGuard, $2,000 device, or even the $1,600 or $1,700 TeamViewer for a single freaking license.
Yeah.
So it's cheap enough, and you know what? Really, I'm treating it like an appliance. And so I had all these rationalizations in my head of why this was going to be okay. And since 2009, I think we've only used 2 or 3 different pieces of proprietary software. And every time I turn around, I realized that trying to run a business on proprietary software is like trying to nail Jell-O to a tree. It comes back to bite you. It will eventually come back to bite you. And so this week, February 1st, we go online with a whole new host of remote services. And so a key freaking part of that is going to be able to actually, control the computers remotely. And this week, so like 6 days before that, 4 days before that goes online, I get an email from our operations director, and he says, "Hey, just wanted to make you aware of a little situation. We went to upgrade the Screen Connect box, and we went to reinstall the software, and our license isn't working." And so I go online to try to get the license situation sorted out. Turns out they have discontinued support for the pay one have your license.
Yep.
And not only do they want their stupid ransom or the newer version, I can't even activate the older version of the software I already paid for and already have a license for on my own machine. I was beyond mad. I was livid. And so now I have spent more, money and time, and I have 3 guys that are sitting working night and day. They're constipated from sitting on their butts so long. They have coffee breath, and they are trying to work to get something else working. So far, we have managed to go through and configure the most important things with VNC. Of course, that requires us to go through and forward a bunch of ports and all this other crap. Thank God the open source community is there to save me, because you can actually set TinyVNC up to automatically call home to a given IP address. And so right now we have a workstation. We're using X2Go to get into it. And our clients can download this little one-off client. They double click on the button, and it automatically does the little NAT transitioning through the firewall and reaches our static box. And then we use X2Go to get into that static box to control it. And so it's not quite as slick as the web browser solution, but it's doing the same thing, and we're doing it with open source. So
sounds like
the plug isn't going to get pulled out from under
it. Kind of sounds like the moral of the story, or the lesson of the story, I guess, is what ended up happening for you is you started selling an aspect of your business around a solution that you didn't have control over. And the nice thing about open source is at the end of all of the effort and the work and the implementation, what you really have is ownership over the future direction of that product. And a lot of times, you think something's a lock, you pay for a lifetime or a year, and then they change the deal out from underneath you. And then when you can't control the back-end technology, now an aspect or a service that you offer as a business is really sort of in the lurch, and your customers expect something from you.
Right. And it is funny because God is sending me a direct message that at the same freaking time that I am struggling with this proprietary crap, we just switched over to OS Ticket, which is an open source ticketing solution. And it wasn't necessarily a closed source solution that we were using before, because really we kind of wrote it, but it was built on some architecture that was closed source. And at the same time that my proprietary solution is falling apart and crumbling my business, at the same time, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're finding more and more things that OS Ticket is capable of doing. And so now we actually have a mailbox that's monitored. And our customers had always been asking, they said, we'd really like a way that we can communicate with you via email. Well, it's difficult to do that, because if they send an email to a shared mailbox, then who responded and how does everyone else know that they responded? And if they send it to one person, what if that person's got it's a nightmare. OS Ticket allows us to have a monitored mailbox, and when somebody sends an email to that mailbox, it automatically opens a ticket for them, puts it in the open queue. The first person to respond to it gets that ticket assigned to them, and then we can track it.
And it's owned.
And so at the same time, one solution is falling apart, another one is just things are getting better and smoother.
I think this hard learned lesson for you is even more critical today, when a lot of us are building a product that has a service, and then we go to sell it to a customer. And if we don't have full control over that, it's almost putting your business at risk. And so the moral of the story is, if it's mission critical for you and your customers, it should probably be open source.
Yep.
Well, I feel for you. And we've talked about Screen Connect on the show before too.
We have, yeah. In fact, I came out very positive on it before, and now I've changed my tune. And what I said in the telegram to you is, I think that was phrased best. It just confirmed what I already knew, that it doesn't matter how convenient or how available or how inexpensive or how practical you think a given solution is. If the code isn't available to you, if it's not open, if it's owned by a company, eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month. We've been using this since 2009. We've never had a problem.
And then boom, I know.
At the most inopportune time, it's going to come out and beat your face in, and you're going to get a Band-Aid from Screen Connect.
That's what we say at Screen Connect. Get rid of that. Get rid of that.
That sound effect fits there.
Oh. I just wanted to,
okay.
I was getting it out of here. Yeah. Hey, Noah, if you're going to roll your own solution, I would definitely recommend rolling it on top of a DigitalOcean droplet where you have root access. It's easy to transfer the image around between data centers. You can take snapshot backups, and it's really your own Linux stack that you can control. It also makes it... What's that?
Where do you think that remote box with the static IP that we have X2Go set up?
Now, could that be bouncing off a DigitalOcean droplet, Noah? Could that be where that's set up?
It might be on a 512 megabyte of RAM, $5 a month DigitalOcean drop.
Yeah, droplets are perfect for that kind of thing when you need to have a machine. Like, just working between my house and here, like what I do for that, DigitalOcean droplets are perfect because it just keeps my data. It allows me to do really simple things like keep a heartbeat online and never worry about the fact that back at Rover 2 now, I'm always on a MiFi connection. My IP address is changing constantly. That makes it very, very hard, but using the DigitalOcean droplet with tons of different software is like a slam dunk. DigitalOcean is a really simple way for you to get a Linux machine going in no time on their super fast servers. In less than 55 seconds, you can get a rig that's 512 megabytes of RAM, 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer for only $5 a month. Just use our promo code LASTDigital, one word, lowercase, because you're a boost. $10 credit. $10 credit, try out the $5 rig 2 months for free. They have a great interface. They have really the best. They have super fast rigs. They have data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Germany, and Toronto. They have an HTML5 console, so whatever browser you want, you can get access to the console so you can watch it from boot all the way up to the login screen. There's some really neat stuff you can do because of that. I'll let you figure that out on your own. But what it really means is you can watch this thing. You can log in as root at the console, and you have peace of mind. At the end of the day, what I really love about DigitalOcean, though, is so much of what they put out there is embraced by the open source community. They work with the open source community upstream with the distributions that they have deployed on their droplets. They commit code to the Doku projects when you're deploying one-click applications. All of that is happening using open source software. They integrate it as part of their business. And it's really clever the way they do it, because then it allows you to have a safe environment with something that's rather cutting edge like Core OS. Or they were one of the first and fastest providers to get really great FreeBSD instances because they worked with FreeBSD. Try out DigitalOcean. Use the promo code LastDigital. You go deploy an Ubuntu box, a Debian box. They got tons of rigs. They also, like I mentioned, have the one-click application deployments. They also have great tutorials. They are edited by professionals, submitted by the community members who get paid for their work. This, right, like I'm linking to right here, is how to protect SSH with fail-to-ban on CentOS 7. Because they have CentOS up there. Really great systems, an intuitive API with tons of open source code. Check it out, DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code LastDigital and see why Noah and I use the heck out of DigitalOcean for basically every need. They are my go-to Linux infrastructure now.
It's funny too, because as I'm thinking about this, I'm embarrassed to say that I've started to take them for granted a little bit. This week I ran into this big problem. The thought of, well, geez, I'm going to need a server infrastructure, and I'm going to need some bandwidth that's going to be able to accommodate all this stuff in a static IP. Before, if I think about what would have happened 8-9 years ago, the conversation would have went like this. Well, we need to get in contact with our Dell rep, and we need to get them to quote us out a power edge, and then we need to see if we can get that overnight, and then we better get on the phone with the ISP and see if we can get another block, another /29.
Even if you fast forward to like 4 years ago, where like for the first few years of this show and Jupiter Broadcasting, everything was actually done on metal actual servers that were slid into a rack by some guy in a data center, and it was probably some white label server. He slides into a rack, and then I'm managing the server. I'm watching when I have disk errors, and I'm making sure I have a RAID and I have a backup that is, all manually set up. And when it was time to add the Jupiter quality form, that meant another server slid into a rack somewhere,
which is another $200 a month.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it was really, there was a time where it was a totally different ballgame to get up and running. And now you're right. It is easy to take it for granted how simple it's become.
Yeah. Colo, when we did Colo, I think we were paying $550 a month, and that was quote unquote a good deal. Yeah. And I think for all this time, I mean, we bill a lot of it out, so the actual bill is much, much higher. But the bill for the services that we use in-house, the stuff that we have, that we consume, that we're not billing out to other customers, we're not reselling, I think the total cost we're paying a month is like $40, $50. And we have a ton of stuff for that $50. But that was just a blip in my mind when I was like, oh, we need all this stuff. I assumed DigitalOcean would have me covered. We went over there, we spun up the droplet in about 13 seconds, and I clicked on the SSH to give the three guys that were working on.
I love the way you can just add the key right there.
So I just clicked Jim, Jonathan, and Lance, and boom, they had access to it, and there we go.
Yeah, now for guys like you too, now they've got some really nice tools to manage and create multiple droplets at once. It's getting really great. Hey, look at that. Eggshen in the chat room says he's chatting via RSSI on a DigitalOcean droplet. He signed up yesterday. Thanks for the $10 credit when he used the promo code LastDigital, and thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Linux Action Show.
Did you know? I know we're gonna move on, but I ran into this kid. He's probably 7 years old or 8 years old
at Scale.
And I see him walk up to the DigitalOcean booth, and he's like, I use DigitalOcean, and I have 3 droplets, and I do this, that, and the other. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Little kids do it. So he runs off, and this next little 7 or 8 year old kid comes up, and he's like, what's this? And so the DigitalOcean people are explaining him to what happens. And I gave him the Linux Action Show code, and I'm like, here, I'll give you the first 2 months of your $5 droplet. He's like, oh, what can I do with it? And so we started talking about it, and it's like, man, I tell you what. If I would have had access to an enterprise grade server on enterprise grade bandwidth when I was 7 or 8 years old,
it blows my mind thinking about that. I know.
I would have flunked out of high school if that would have happened.
Maybe so. Tyler says he's been doing Quassel Core for a year and a half on his DigitalOcean droplet. That's one of the things I use DO for as well. Okay, so I hope I don't get a lot of flames for this particular desktop app pick this week, because it's not technically one app, and it's all for one desktop. You guys hate it when we do that. Now, in my defense, I was using Plasma Desktop all weekend long. So there's that. I just want to put that out there. However, I get asked this question all the time. Basically, anytime I put my screen up on air, I get asked this question. So I thought for our desktop app pick this week, there was a really great blog post that was this guy's roundup of all of his really favorite GNOME extensions. And so I just want to bust through a couple of these that we love and then give you a link to go get more. We won't spend too much time because I know some of you this is totally not applicable for. But even if you're not a GNOME user, you might be curious what they do on the other side and what they're using extensions to get functionality that you probably already have built into your desktop. So it's over at Linuxocious. I don't know how you say the site's name, but there's a couple on here. There's a whole bunch, but there's a couple on here that I like. Because I'm an Arch user, Arch Linux updates indicator gives you exactly that, tells you how many packages and what they are, and you can update right there. Caffeine, developed by a friend of the show, is a must. This allows you to enable or disable your screensaver, and I think if I can't show you, but I have the extension. When I click it, I get a little notification that my screensaver and power management are disabled. So if you just want to have your laptop or something go to sleep from time to time, but maybe for whatever reason, for this moment, you're watching a video or you're going to come back to it, you don't want your screensaver or power management to kick in, you click caffeine and it keeps your machine awake. Pretty simple.
For example, maybe if you're an IT contractor and you're at different sites, and so you want your laptop to suspend all those times, but then you come in on Sunday to do a show, and you'd like your laptop to stay on for a 3-hour show.
Yes, maybe exactly.
Have caffeine installed.
Yes.
And you just
Dash to dock. I think this is everybody's favorite, really. Yeah. And I use it in a way that actually makes it more like Unity. In fact, you know what? I'll show you. I took a screenshot of my work desktop. Let me zoom out here a bit for you guys so you can see it. So this is my work desktop. It's kind of hard to see, but through extensions, I'll go through the top here. You can see I've got the Arch status update indicator. I've got my favorite ping time indicator, which I think is a must-have for the GNOME desktop. It's a great way. I've got a SyncThing indicator that I get my SyncThing status right there, and I also obviously have an extension that makes my top bar semi-transparent unless I have a window that's maximized. Next to that, I have uptime. I had just rebooted, so I had 1 minute of uptime. I have an Imager screenshot extension that I love. That's how I took this very screenshot. And I have my network speed indicator, so I can see what my network transfer is. And then last but not least, I have an extension we're about to talk about that tells me the temperatures of my CPU and my GPUs. And then over here on the side, you can see I'm using Dash to Dock to give myself like a little status dock. So there you go. That's my personal work desktop upstairs. So you can see how I use some of these. I have one on here that I want to encourage you not to use. Nothing against the developer. Drop-down terminal is, I think, a little unsafe. No disparity to the developer. Essentially, if you're doing updates or you're doing something in the drop-down terminal that causes GNOME Shell to crash, like you're replacing some binaries or something like that, if that's being done in drop-down terminal, it will crash as part of the overall desktop crash.
No.
Yeah, and then you can be in a world of hurt. So that's why I still prefer to use Gwake on GNOME or Uwake on, because they're a separate process from the shell, and they don't die if the shell dies. However, if you're just doing simple stuff, drop-down terminal, nice and simple. Here's dynamic panel transparency like I was talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
Look, I just want to ask, do you know, so one of the things that's frustrating about Gwake, and I'm wondering now that you gave that explanation, if I have my Gwake window open and I have my regular terminal window open, if I type in a command, particularly if I'm copying a file to a server and it's a big long rsync or scp command, and I hit enter, that command isn't immediately available in my bash history in Gwake. Is that because it's two separate instances, and will the drop-down terminal not suffer from that particular problem?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of only one of them is probably right into your history file for some reason. I don't remember the details, but like if you opened up, I bet if you opened up two just regular terminal windows side by side, you'd probably experience that same thing.
Oh, okay.
So dynamic panel transparency, I'll just bust through the rest of these for you guys who don't care, is what the extension I use to get my panel transparent, sort of like Elementary does. Freon is extension to get the CPU, hard drive, and GPU temperatures right in your menu. Impatient speeds up some of the animations. And that's pretty much all I use. Volume mixer is nice. I use that too. I find it these days I'm down to like 7 or 8 GNOME extensions, and they all seem to be pretty good, and I haven't really had any of them break for a while. Oh, one other that's not on there is there's also a global D&D mode that you can enable, so that way you don't get notifications like when you're doing a show.
And you have other extensions, but you get them as a part of Antergos, right?
Yeah, when I load Antergos, although for the most part, I don't actually like Antergos extensions because the way Antergos installs them generally is from the Antergos repo, and they're not always up to date as fast as I would like in there, and they usually get updated first on the GNOME extension site. So a lot of times I remove them, not always, but a lot of times I remove them and go install them from GNOME extensions. So that way I can just go to the GNOME extension site after a big update and just go get the updates directly and not have to wait for Anagross to update them in their repo.
Sure.
This is my style. So anyways, they will have that linked in the show notes, as well as if you're listening and want to see what my work desktop looks like. I think it's a nice looking desktop. Got that linked in the show notes. We got 2 projects to spotlight this week. Couldn't just pick one. Since I just went all GNOME heavy, I had to go something that was Qt happy, and that's, I'm going to say, Yurok. Now, we've mentioned Yurok in the past, and Yurok is a totally different ballgame now. It is a nice-looking, perfect for the Plasma desktop, full-featured music player that is really competitive. Obviously, you can browse local music. It has smart playlist generation, very good search, track rating. It has multiple audio backends, just like UKD fans love, Phonon, VLC, MPV. Replay gain support, which I love. Gapless playback, which makes you sound like a boost at a party. Of course, MP3, OGG, FLAC, WMA, MPEG-4, AAC files. Audio equalizer. Great interface. Web audio streaming, which is sweet. You could stream jblive.fm. That's Yurok. Very nice looking. I likes it a lot. For the GNOME folks, Lollipop's getting some attention this week. Now, Yurok has a lot of lovers in our subreddit. I haven't heard a lot about Lollipop in the subreddit. Lollipop is a music player for GNOME. They focus on a nice UI, MP3, MP4, OGG, and FLAC support, replay gain support, MTB device syncing, so you can sync with Android phones that support NTP, cover art downloader, party mode, which allows Lollipop to play music for you. So since I'm on the GNOME desktop, I installed it here. No, I have a Lollipop right here, and I can kind of show you the UI. It's fast. It's nice. Look at that. These are my albums here, and when I go...
I love windowless apps.
Yeah.
There's just something about it. Like, it doesn't matter. Even if it crashed every 30 seconds, I would still say it's the best app in the world just because it's windowless.
You see how they've integrated the playback into the header bar here?
Yeah,
so all of that, yeah, that's really nice. And I'll show you, like, if I'll go into Ronald Jenkins, which I could go into safely without getting copyright pulled down. And I can play any of his songs here. And it's got a nice interface to it. It brings the art in here. The playback control is done up here at the top of the show, or at the top of the bar, at the top of the show. It's at the top of the show now. And here, if I just turn up you can still get a little music there. It breaks down all the artists on the left. It's a very traditional interface. It has also radio support, which is really nice. Should just have jblive.fm built in. It does recently added. It has popular albums, which I'm not sure how it determines that because none of my music's popular. Yeah, it is very quick and fast. I'm not as big into these anymore, but this is just the right amount of functionality and basic features that if I was going to use a music player, I think this would be the one. I'm liking it quite a bit. So that's Lollipop and Yurok. One Qt, one GTK. You get to pick and choose which best for your desktops. Try them out and let us know at linuxactionshow.reddit.com. If you'd like to submit an app for a future spotlight or maybe something we could show a little bit on the show, we'd love to see it. linuxactionshow.reddit.com. That's where you can submit them. And to get previous app picks, jupiterbroadcasting.com/lastpicks, which is on GitHub if you want to contribute and help update as well. All right, Noah, let's do the news.
The news in this episode is brought to you by
Ting.com. Everybody knows that. Go to last.ting.com to support this show and get yourself a great discount. Last.ting.com. You can get money off a Ting device, or if you have a Ting compatible device, you'll get a service credit. And Ting's got 2 networks, CDMA and GSM, for you to choose from, so there probably is a network that's compatible with your phone. But here's what I love about Ting. That's why I think I'm going on like my 3rd year. I know I rounded the corner in January. It is so straightforward. You just pay for what you use. It's $6 for your line, and then your usage on top of that. There was a service provider out there in the last couple of weeks that was touting unlimited, and then they just sent out very quietly a letter to all of their customers talking about the new data tiers that they're going to be implementing. That's better for everybody for a good percentage of their users. Ting just does away with all of that complexity. You just pay for what you use. It's $6 a month for the line. They take your minutes, your messages, and your megabytes. They add them up. Whatever you use, that's all you pay. So for 3 lines, if you're Wi-Fi savvy, you can get away with really unbelievable savings. So they have a bunch of great already unlocked devices. Go to last.ting.com and then click shop. Everything from the base SIM card and a feature phone that starts at $50 all the way up to the Cadillac luxury smartphones. I tell you, they also have outrageously great customer service, as our very own Noah could attest to.
So this week I switched my wife over to the GSM side. She was on the CDMA side before, and it has been just I know all the arguments about how much more secure CDMA is, more of better evolution technology, blah blah blah. I know all the arguments against it. I don't care. It's the fact that I can take my SIM card out, pull it out of one phone, stick it in the other, because that is one step easier than using their incredibly easy to use dashboard to deactivate one, activate another. But in my process of my horrible week, I had switched my wife over to the GSM side, and at the same time, like the day before, my wallet ended up getting my debit card ended up getting stolen or lost or whatever it was that happened. I don't know, but ended up canceling that, and that happened to be when I swapped her over to the GSM side. That triggered some sort of a billing thing, and they tried to run my card, which of course was canceled, and so. They didn't shut my service off. They sent me an email and said, "Hey, we had some trouble billing you. We activated everything as you asked, so her phone was active and working. But when you get a chance, get a hold of us. Let us when it's convenient for you. Go in, log in, update your stuff, and let us know." And so I did that, but I took a little too long. And so what had ended up happening was they hotlined a couple of the phones, which basically means like I didn't pay for the service for long enough. And so they didn't take them away from me. They just flagged them so that, to call in and so that I could get it resolved. So I call in, they answered, there was a long list of other people that were there. And so they have an option. You just say, call me back and I'm going to go do other things. And then we'll get, you keep your place in line.
Love that.
And yeah, it was great. And the guy calls me back in like, probably under 2 minutes, because I from the time I hung up, I walked over to my kitchen table to sit down to eat, and then he called me back. So I may as well just waited on the phone. But he gets on the phone. Not only has he heard of the Linux Action Show, and he's actually applied our credit, our recommended. He's like, yeah, I've actually, because I told him, I said, I love talking about you, on Linux Action Show. Because yeah, I've actually watched your show and I'm aware of you guys, and I've actually applied that discount for customers before. And so then we started talking about Linux and how Ting really fits the open source ecosystem and how that works. And it got my phones unhotlined in about, and I was back. And then as it turns out, the phone that we got for my wife, she didn't like. And so we went back, bought a different phone from Best Buy. And because of the whole GSM thing, I just pulled the SIM card out from one, stuck it in the other, and she was good to go. And she's having a great experience. So if you have all day to wait in line and you want to sign contracts and fill out paperwork, then I would stay away from Ting. But if you want to take 30 seconds and activate a line or unactivate a line or add a line for your son so he can send you weird telegrams and selfies, then $6 a month, Ting's a good way to go.
Absolutely. Also a great way if you're a small business. Trust me, I've been doing it for years now. Last.ting.com, and a big thank you to Ting for sponsoring this show. It was really cool to see everybody rocking Ting at scale, and thank you guys for going to last.ting.com and just checking Ting out, trying out their savings calculator. Just doing that is a great way to help this show. Last.ting.com. I like it, because once you go there, it's pretty self-explanatory why you'd want to switch. So let's go down the security route this week. Every now and then there's a story that just grabs a lot of tech press, and they just have to run it. And they always have the usual disclaimers and paragraphs. We've sifted through all of that, and I'm going to bring you the best of the Snap Happy Trojan that is targeting Linux servers. Now, the reason they put Linux servers in the headline is because, and I'm not joking here, all of the reporters and analysis are like, well, Linux is used on servers a lot, so this must be a Trojan for servers, even though it's using your microphone audio and taking screenshots of your desktop. They're like, this is a Trojan for servers because we only know Linux and servers. Anyways, we'll kind of pull through some of the crap here like Linux Insider has done. Security researchers at Dr. Web on Tuesday reviewed details of the Trojan known as Linux ECOMS 1, which takes screenshots and records audio to acquire sensitive and personal information. This means that even when the system doesn't have juicy data, it could be a very compelling hiding spot for months or years, which is interesting because that little bit of detail almost kind of gives away who might be interested in something like this. Somebody who's extremely patient, or a state who's extremely patient that wants to get this on there so when they need to turn on reconnaissance, they can. This is a Trojan, which means it disguises itself as something else. A user may get tricked into downloading this piece of software thinking it was for some other purpose, and subsequently his or her machine gets infected. Once the malware is launched, Linux ECOMS 1 looks for a subfolder in the home directory containing files with like .mozilla Firefox profile D or Dropbox cache. And if it fails to find those, it randomly chooses a subfolder to save its own copy there, and it makes these files. It creates every 30 seconds a screenshot in the JPEG format. If the Trojan can't write to JPEG for some reason, it tries BMP. Also, it records audio in a wave-like format. It's got a different kind of extension, but it's essentially a wave file that it's taking from the microphone. Now, interestingly about this, they reviewed the code and they watched it in the wild. They don't actually ever see it transmitting this stuff anywhere. So it's recording audio and taking screenshots, but it's essentially just a reconnaissance Trojan. It's not really doing anything with that data. It's probably intended for somebody to get into the system and grab it. But, you know, the tech press really spun this as something that affects servers, Noah. And so I thought, okay, well, let's kick that around for a second. Do you think it would be valuable to have a Linux Trojan on the server that's taking screenshots of X and turning on the mic? Like maybe there's some servers that have microphones?
Not that I've seen, man. And here's the thing. If it does take a screenshot, here's what you would get on any of the servers we manage. The host name, login, full colon.
Yeah.
The host name, login, full colon. We've never, I bet less than 5 times a year, at a maximum 5 times a year, do we ever actually go up to the physical machine? And this is on the servers that we don't just put on DigitalOcean, which I can guarantee you we've never really logged into the console. But 5 times a year, maybe we log into the console and you might be looking at some log files, because that's usually if we're sitting at the server, that's probably what we're doing. But almost 99.9% of the stuff is all done remotely. And in the Linux, if this is true, in a Windows world, yes, you have graphical user interfaces and people use their fancy RDP clients to click around because they don't know how to use, the command line. But in Linux, we rarely, if ever, do you have a server with a head on it. Most of the time, it's just a console. So
and so to me, this seems kind of legitimately like this is really targeting the Linux desktop. What we have here, for some reason, is a genuine.
That's bad if it's taking screenshots. That's no good.
Yeah,
that is something that would really bother me. But if it's not going anywhere, I guess that I guess the only thing that would irritate me then is that would start to eat up disk space, depending on.
Yeah, that's true. Especially on a machine with a small SSD. I actually one of the reasons I'm reporting on this is because I don't think anybody in our audience is ever going to get infected by this or anything like this. The reason why I'm reporting on this isn't the first one this year. This is like the second or third one this year. And so this, for some reason, is happening more and more. And I got to figure it's the decline of Windows in certain categories of users. And the categories of users that are declining in Windows usage are of a certain target for certain malware authors, because you're not getting like, this isn't like you're not getting malware that's doing advertising and taking over your search and changing your host file, which if you think about it, if you install a package that was a Trojan, when it's running as root, it could easily rewrite your Etsy resolve file or your host file to serve you malware or spam. They're not doing that. What they're doing is reconnaissance. In a lot of these Trojan cases, it's reconnaissance. And I'm just speculating, but I'm starting to think, well, then there must be people out there that are of interesting reconnaissance targets. I don't know. So like Linux users, when we get targeted, it's like we have really badass targets. Like I think that's kind of what I'm taking from this is.
Yeah, it's Q56 in the chat room says, this sounds like something that would be, perpetuated by law enforcement, and that they would target, that law enforcement would target people, and so that when they seize the computer, then all the screen grabs are there and stuff. But I submit to you a couple of things. First of all, on any software platform, Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, Yalla, whatever. It is always a bad idea. 100% of the time, it is always a bad idea to execute code if you don't understand what it is you're doing. If somebody sends you a link and tells you click on this, download this piece of software, 100% of the time on every platform, that's a bad idea. Yeah. So that's factoid number one. Here's factoid number two. A lot of the people, let's go with the idea that maybe it is, from the government or from the police
maybe it's stashed in with something you don't expect, like another package or something. Maybe it's snuck in. I don't know.
The people that are smart enough to be using that have gone to the lengths of wiping out their entire operating system and running a specialized operating system for the pure fact of being more secure private, are not the kind of people that are going to be susceptible to, I piggybacked this code onto this package.
I don't know if I agree. I don't. Well, only because we have built up a culture of trust around some things that we shouldn't have. In fact, we're going to talk about it in our Scale segment. Mark Shuttleworth addressed this during his keynote. We put way too much faith in random PPAs. And it really would not take very much for, a GNOME theme PPA to be full of bogus code, even by accident.
You know what I know about the Telegram PPA? That it's the first PPA that comes up when I Google Telegram PPA. That's the amount of research.
Right.
And you're right. Right. I blindly copy that PPA and dump it in my system and install Telegram. And if something was piggybacked onto it, it would. You're 100% right. I just don't think the people that are using it to be privacy conscious. I mean, I'm using it because
you want to get work done.
Right. I think that the people that are going to it for the like somebody like Edward Snowden that's using, Tails, for example, I don't think those kind of people are willy-nilly adding PPAs to their system. I guess
right, but I think my point I started with is people like him, like Edward Snowden and others, are using Linux because of the advantages it gives them, which by that very nature makes Linux more of an attractive target to law enforcement, sort of to Q5sys's point. And in that, because those types of users are on that system, they have to double down their efforts to crack that system.
Yeah. So they're exploiting where we're weak, which is, you're right, we have an inbred of trust inside of our community.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that more in the Scale segment. So let's pause that conversation and move forward and talk about Linux Mint's huge month. Then they're doing something kind of big, kind of interesting. Let's start with, though, the good news. I think as a clear vote of confidence from their user base, Linux Mint has had an all-time high of donations of $16,736. They had to double-check their numbers twice to make sure it wasn't a mistake. That follows the release of Linux Mint 17.3, which was based, as you probably all know, on 1404 LTS. And they say not only does it help for our funding, it's also extremely gratifying and motivating for us. Many thanks to the 714 people who supported us. 714 people made the difference for Linux Mint. It really is kind of, it reminds me of our own Patreon funding. And they also say thanks to our partners and sponsors for being here. Now, moving forward, let's talk about Mint's look and feel, which hasn't changed a lot. Even the background hasn't changed very much for a long time. They say, this is, I believe, Clem writing, we're also very conservative and very demanding in the way we do things. We know that what we want from our OS, and if something doesn't fit, we adapt it, replace it, or rewrite it. Our vision doesn't change easily. It remains more or less the same. We just are constantly refining it. It's been at the heart of the Mate project since the beginning, and we've invested a huge amount of our efforts into the Cinnamon project. That was a commitment not to change desktop paradigms when GNOME 2 wasn't available to us any longer, and we worked around it so that Linux Mint could go on being Linux Mint. We've also embraced an LTS strategy, and that's a sign that we're focused on the long term. We're not experimenting. We've all witnessed the rise of the iPad and the iPhone. This was attributed to iOS somehow, and it started a new trend with various projects trying to replicate Apple's success, inventing new formulas and radically changing their own goals. I think he's poking at GNOME here. Focus, their identity, in the process, we're all lost. We've seen an artistic trend called flat, which brings colors with no gradients, minimalistic widgets, taking these projects on by storm. You don't see us at the forefront of all of that. We do keep a close eye on it without any intention to jump into it, but rather to learn from it and see if it can help us improve in what we're already doing.
I love this.
Sounds good to you so far, right?
I can follow this guy 100%. And the thing is, in business, we call that looking at best practices, and then we implement those best practices if we want our business to do what that business is doing, right? And so, if I'm understanding him right, what he's saying is we've gone and looked at the market and decided what has worked best and where we think we can succeed. And you know what the thing is, Chris? Here's the thing. The thing is that the Linux desktop is all distributions. They're all focusing on something else, but Linux Mint seems to be focusing on the one thing that you and I keep seeming to say is important, and that is we need a good, solid, reliable desktop that maybe this is more me than you. A good, solid, reliable desktop that is going to work and give the people that are coming to Linux for the first time a really solid, trouble-free experience. And they just keep working. It sounds like their intention is just to keep polishing things and only changing things when they absolutely need to be changed. And you know what? That's not going to work for me personally. And I know it's probably not going to work for you personally. But for a lot of people, man, I can see that use case shine. And big time, too. There's a ton of people I think fit right in there.
Well, Noah, like Uncle Leo always says,
it's for people who like to mess with computers.
So I presume this user of Linux is actually a niche. This Linux user who is delicate and doesn't want a changing desktop. I think these are users where Linux was sort of forced upon them, and they have no allegiance or commitment to the platform. I think people.
It's for people who like to mess with computers.
They like to mess with their computers. Don't necessarily use Mint, but here is. I don't disagree with your overall premise. It's obviously working. They just raised a ton of money, which is obviously a clear vote of confidence from their user base, saying you're going the right direction. This is the issue I have with extremely dogmatic thinking like this, is it leads to the next paragraph. XApps. Work started on Linux Mint 18. One important aspect is GNOME 3.18. Okay, so all of a sudden, this new fancy software that we reject is all of a sudden critical for the next version of Linux Mint. Well, guess what? We run into a hell of a problem when we need new current software after we've decided to live off in our own LTS land for 2 years. The project and all its components, not just the desktop environment, which includes GTK and many of its applications used primarily by Cinnamon, but also XFCE, and to a lesser extent, Mate. A lot has changed between version 3.10, which is used in Linux Mint 17, which is ancient, and version 3.18. GTK itself and many of the GNOME applications now integrate better with GNOME Shell and look more native in that environment. The bad news is that they now look completely out of place everywhere else. Is that the way to put that? Or is the way to put that everything else being Mint or Cinnamon and Mate, and they've just not kept up? Is it GNOME looks out of place everywhere else, or are they not kept up? I leave you guys to decide, but he continues on. The bad news is they now look completely out of place everywhere else. To make matters worse, Unity, the flagship product of Ubuntu, relies heavily on GTK, GNOME applications, and the GNOME environment itself. So we're not dealing with the upstream version of GNOME.3.18 here, but with a collection of patches which bring their own issues. In the past, this issue was present, but it wasn't important. We solved it by burying our heads. We solved it by downgrading apps. Linux Mint 17 uses gedit 2.30, for instance, patching GNOME, and using alternatives, mostly in Mate and XFCE. This worked well for the short term. Now, this is an issue that we've always said, how are they not going to run into these problems? They're going to run into these problems eventually. Well, they've got a solution. XApps will be a collection of generic GTK3 applications, like the one I'm showing here on screen. This is their text editor. Their XApp generic text editor, which they are going to be forking and building themselves, along with a bunch of other applications. XApps will allow us to maintain a native look and good level of integration because they will be used in replacement of GNOME applications, which now look foreign using header bars and a distinctive layout. Long term, the XApp project will allow us to innovate and develop new features and improvements in the applications themselves, which is something that we could do for all desktops. It's not necessarily just for Mate and Cinnamon. So I have an example of a text editor. Here's the basics. Xedit now uses GTK3, so it supports high DPI. It's a generic application called text editor, so it looks native in Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. Under the hood, it doesn't necessarily depend on GNOME or Mate. And it's an application we can develop not only for us, but for other distributions, and not only for one desktop, but for many. So, solving the problem that Linux has always suffered from, it's a wash in video editors and great audio editors, and suffering from a total lack of text editors, we now have XApps with Xedit, just in time for Wayland and Unity to switch to Qt, Mint solving the problem of forking from GNOME. I don't mean to be a total dick about this, and if anybody has a proven track record of forking projects, Mate and Cinnamon, hello, and actually having traction and success and the rest of the community adopting them, it's Mint and Clem. So that is a big disclaimer up front. They have a proven track record of actually having success here, but at the end of the day, really, another text editor, an XApps, I really don't mean to be it's so pedantic about this, but like even the name kind of offends me because XApps is like a call out to, first of all, do we need more XApps, XIs, and X everything? And finally, when we're finally at the precipice of getting rid of X11, now we have XApps. It feels almost like a curmudgeon, stick in the mud, line will not be crossed sort of statement. And I don't mean to frame it like that because I have a lot of respect for Clem and I have a lot of respect for what they've done with Mint 17.3. I thought it was a great release. But at the same time, all of the things we thought could happen and go wrong, they now have gotten to the end of this cycle and those things are all coming true. And their answer for it isn't sync up with upstream and deliver something amazing based off upstream. It's, well, fork and go our own way now. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely 100% hit the nail on the head. So let's start with this. First of all, I'm not a developer. And so if I'm wrong about my perception of what is difficult and not difficult in the development world, there I've said it. But to me, it seems as though it is simpler to fork to maintain a desktop distribution than it is to try and maintain all of the Linux apps available. And so you can, it's one thing to say, well, we're going to make our own desktop and we'll borrow code from here and there, and then we'll make it look nice and integrated and all this stuff. But they still have access to the large ecosystem of applications that run on the rest of Linux. And because a lot of those are, work well in GNOME because they're based partly on GNOME or run kind of from GNOME, they trust that those and I trust that those applications are going to work on your distribution. You've literally made your own operating system when you decide, we're going to have our own desktop, and we're going to kind of base it on Ubuntu, except we're going to pick and choose the version that we're going to use. And, oh, by the way, we're going to rewrite all of the apps since they don't look right in our operating system. To me, that's just nuts. That's completely nuts. And you're 100% right when you say that. You cannot just write an application and say, well, now we've written a text editor. It doesn't work like that. You have to update the text editor. You can't just hang them out and then they're done. That is a huge workload, and it's something that I have been at least very, very critical of Canonical from doing in the past, doing it from the desktop alone. Now they want to do it with the entire app ecosystem. That makes absolutely no sense.
Here's one thing that does strike me as a huge differentiator for them. When you take what they're doing here and you say, add a year history to this, in a year from now, we're all going to be playing around with Unity 8 likely, right? 1604 is going to have the early implementations of it, but really 1610 we'll have had at this point in time next year, we'll all be running 1610 that are choosing to run Ubuntu. And I bet Unity 8 is going to be an option in there. Unity 8 is going to be so much new stuff and new look and all of that the contrast of Mint 18 and Mint 17 sticking with that traditional look is going to be even more pronounced. And in some ways, I think it's going to be a benefit for them. But I guess so. I totally see the market forces that are pushing them to do this, and sort of like this mentality of it took us 25, 35 years to get the desktop to this point. Why throw all that out? That kind of mentality that influences this thinking. And I also understand a lot of people think that client-side decorations on GNOME are funky looking. However, I think a lot of people think they look very modern. So when I see this, what I see is they're making sort of a line that they're going to say, we are the traditional desktop. We are the home of traditional desktop values. And that is such a high priority for us that we are willing to maintain our own 2 desktop environments and all of these X applications. And on top of that, and I give them full credit for this, we're not only going to do this, we think other people in the community are going to pick these applications up and make them better. Maybe Xubuntu will want to look at X text edit, right? Maybe Xubuntu will like that. Maybe LXDE. I mean, I don't know. There seems like there could be some traction here, but it's.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the traction. I'm not seeing it at all.
What is the long-term play out here? I mean, how far can you take this exactly?
Listen, I agree that there is I 100% agree that there is a market. In fact, I see that market every single day of people that, you know what? There are a ton of people that still think Windows XP is the best operating system in the world. And then there's only second to them, there's a bunch of people that are like, listen, you know where it's at? Windows ME, Windows 2000. That's before Microsoft went off the deep end and screwed everything up. And then, the rest of us think that, if it had to tolerate Windows, 7 is the place to kind of sit, and then you can kind of tolerate 10 because it's better than 8. But my point is that once we went to this weird looking start menu, and definitely when we went to the stupid Metro crap, that was a lot of people just broke off and said, listen, I don't care what every operating system is doing. I like having a little button down at the lower left-hand corner that I click on, and I click on my program, and all my programs are there. And I think there is definitely a market for that. And I have used Mint in those, Cinnamon rather, in those situations, and it's worked very, very well. And so I don't have a problem if they want to concentrate on providing a really great experience on a legacy desktop, type look. But you have to do that with the new apps that are coming out, with modern software. You have to find a way to make that look half decent, or if you can't.
That's what I expected, I guess. I think that's what I expected.
And if you can't, so be it. But here's the thing. Then we have to accept that there are going to be people that if you want to use a legacy-looking desktop, it's going to look weird when you're using modern apps. And that's just a compromise that those people will have to deal with.
That's what I expected.
That seems like a more reasonable, logical, and sustainable
scalable
approach.
Yes.
Yeah, then we'll just do it ourselves, man. We'll just write them ourselves.
But you know what? They've been successful so far. They really have been. They've been successful. I mean, they're making more money than ever. They have more users than ever.
I question if that's going to scale to. I mean, it's one thing to do a desktop, a desktop environment. It's a whole nother thing to do every. Yeah, I don't know. It just. I don't know.
I mean, they can fork existing good stuff, but yeah. Also, just a shout out. They've expanded their hardware partnership with AirTop, which is those look pretty cool. Little mint boxes right there. Very nice, very nice. All right, Noah, I think you're probably excited about this next story. OBS Multiplatform 0.13.0 is out. Here's what got my attention. Tell me what you think of this.
Yeah.
Studio mode, which allows editing different scenes and sources without changing the output. So you can now do preview editing before it goes live, before the shot goes live. Heyo. Added scene transitions. How do you like your crossfades, Noah? Added support for animated GIF playback for the image source. Added an option to the media source to allow the ability to restart the media file when the source becomes active. So like clips and stuff can now be restarted when you make the shot active. That's pretty hot stuff. Completely rewrote the audio subsystem, which enables the ability for transition. Minimizes audio buffering and removes the need for audio buffering time setting. You know that little time setting where you could change the auto buffering? That's gone now. You don't need that anymore. Also, the status bar now displays a warning if the encoder is overloaded, letting you know where the problem is at. And last but not least, for Linux specifically, improved rendering performance by fixing an issue where the program was rendering with VSync.
I'm trying to send you a screen cap of what my exact response to Rakai when he sent me this list, and now you should have it. But basically, what it amounted to was everything I have been wishing for in OBS has come through in this last release. The biggest thing, and I mean the biggest thing for me. Yeah, he's looking at it. The biggest thing is transitions, because there is nothing more jarring than especially when you're trying to gradually go from one thing to the other, or you're trying to make a fluid statement when you're talking and you want to go over to to a shot of your computer, and all of a sudden just boom, then it changes, and then boom, it's back to your face.
We use hard cuts here. We use hard cuts here, but when we're
use them at the appropriate place.
When we're transitioning from like one state of the stream to the other state, that's a crossfade. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
That's nice.
There are definitely times when it would have, I think it would have been really nice to have crossfades. And so that was one
alone,
of the big,
right? I like preview editing before the shot goes live. That's very nice.
Well, yeah. And so it's funny too, because anyone that's ever watched when either we're hosting a show from a live event, or when I'm hosting the show, from my location, you'll notice you can see like the chat room getting bigger and the chat room getting smaller and the cursor going over there. And a lot of times I'll disable the cursor. And so you won't see the way it captures X is it only captures one X window, and so you don't see the little sub menus that pop up. So you'll see my cursor like go here, and then it stops, and then it moves down, then it moves over.
But you can't see the menu.
You can't see any of the menus, and so it makes for a really awkward shot. And there's no other way to do it than to do that live. And so this is going to change everything, and it fits in line this week with somebody patting me on the back and just saying, listen, when you trust in open source software, eventually you might have to put up with a couple little headaches, but the rug will always be there. You'll always have at least a solid place to land, and it will only get better as time goes on. So
on that thread, something we've been using that is going to come back and bite us in the butt sooner than later. We've been using it with some success. Slack.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about Slack though, and why I don't really care one way or the other is, let's face it, if instantaneously tomorrow Slack was gone,
we'd use IRC.
Just go back to IRC.
Yeah. I actually think there's something else we could go to. I say bring it. You ready? No. Well, yes, Mattermost. But how about Semaphore? This is something coming from Spider Oak. Semaphore helps teams improve their productivity by keeping members focused, informed, and connected. It's like essentially Spider Oak is going to do their own Slack, hosted by them, currently in development. Semaphore will be available on all major operating systems as an open source application. The CEO of Spider Oak said, to make the project more accessible to a security review, Semaphore is implemented from a single code base using Google's Go programming language with Go Mobile. Openness and security auditing are key attributes and responsibility building our responsibility building any new encryption product. Teams can elect host accounts with Spider Oak, or if they don't want to host it with Spider Oak, they can do on-premises for increased privacy. It's going to be $6 a month for team plans. Much cheaper than Slack. And Semaphore will introduce several new features to the workplace. I think Slack is $8 a user. Semaphore will introduce several new features to the workplace collaboration market, including its proprietary Nervous design, a password-free account creation, and keyless identity verification. How about that? Slack competitor coming from the folks at Spider Oak. And they say it's going to be open source. Now, how much open source is in there and that proprietary nervous system? We'll have to wait and see. But watch out, Slack. Open source is coming for you. All right, you know what else is coming? KDE Neon. It was just announced, put out by Jonathan Riddle from Kubuntu fame. Going to get to that more in a second. This is probably my future KDE distribution right here. It's the latest in KDE community software packaged on top of a rock-solid base. Brand new user-level apps, the best in the Plasma desktop, on top of a nice, stable Ubuntu core. Now, why I give this some serious cred is, first of all, they had an awesome, Jay Riddle tweeted their awesome launch photos at FOSDOM, which was really cool. But, I've been curious to see what Jonathan was going to do after he left Kubuntu. And this is his big project, KDE Neon, which he just announced. And there's no code yet. You can't download it just yet, but you can actually. I think there is code. If you go to Get KDE Neon, when you go to their website, they have images that will be available eventually. You can get notified, but there's also some steps to take an Ubuntu base right now and get KDE Neon going. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. We don't have a lot of details yet because it was the website just went live yesterday, but super excited about this. Actually, I guess Friday. It went live Friday. KDE Neon. Noah, when they start shipping code, this is the distro I think you should try KDE out. Well, if it looks solid, I think this is the one you should give a go. And use KDE for like a week or a month. They have an
estimated release date? Did I miss this?
I don't think they have one yet, but they do have a way to get notified. You could just start with a base Ubuntu machine and essentially get Neon now if you follow their guide, but you might as well just wait.
Here's what I'll do. If they have it out by the time that Linux Fest Northwest rolls around, I will do my whole Linux Fest Northwest week in KDE Neon.
You crazy.
No, I think that'd be fun. It's because I'll be totally away from home, so if anything goes wrong, I'd be totally, completely screwed.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
It'd be good. You'd be out of your element. You'd be under the gun. It's a perfect time to try an entirely new desktop environment with an entirely new distro.
I'm glad we're on the same page.
All right.
Coming from the guy who updates his Arch machine on air.
Every show. All right. So if you'd like to submit a story for the show, linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and stay tuned for Noah's Week on KDE Neon. You know we're all going to enjoy that. And that is all the news for this week. Last week, Noah and I made it out to Southern California Linux Expo in Pasadena, California. We went sort of at separate times, so that way we could come back with coverage of the start of Scale, which was UbiCon with Mark Shuttleworth's keynote, and the end of Scale, which was really the bulk of the main conference itself with the expo floor and, of course, a lot of community stuff. So we're going to share some of our tales with you. But first, I want to thank our segment sponsor, Linux Academy. Go to linuxacademy.com/unplugged to get our special Unplugged discount, but we brought it here to Linux Action Show. Linux Academy is a learning platform for all of the technologies around Linux. DevOps, AWS, Linux itself, the Red Hat courses. Noah can tell you a little bit about that. We have over 2,205 self-paced courses. Scenario-based labs and instructor help is available whenever you need it. I love scenario-based training. One of the things that's jumped out at me about Linux Academy, really, now that we've been covering them for a while, they've really gotten a name for themselves out there. You can see here a little shot of some of the technologies that they have on their learning platform. They just announced a partnership with the Linux Foundation, which is great. And I also want to call attention to something that I found on their blog. You know, I obviously follow them. I'm a member of Linux Academy myself. And they have live shows where they have been announcing some incredible improvements to the Linux Academy service. And so you just keep getting more and more for your subscription. So some new courses. Ansible and AWS were announced, advanced AWS security, using EC2 container services, Docker and Elastic Beanstalk, and I don't know if I'm getting this one right. I'm not familiar with this. Lambda? L-A-M-D-A. I don't know, BDA. It sounds pretty awesome. Lambda. Also in AWS, they've added a whole bunch of new courses. They have a new episode called Cloud Cadet. Go check this out. This is like a series you can watch. The AWS stuff is extremely valuable too because they spin up AWS instances as part of their labs on demand. You don't pay for that. It's just part of your Linux Academy service. Under the Linux category, they're calling out some student successes, which is really a cool thing. I love seeing the Linux Essential courses because people are going and getting familiar with Linux with some really great courseware in there. And of course, the LX103 and LX104s by Eric G. Congratulations, Eric. Also, OpenStack and Red Hat, EKA passed the Red Hat CSA 7 exam. Is that Certified Systems Administration, Noah?
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
There you go. Also, huge news for Linux Academy now. They have a new iOS app. The Android app is in the works. This is crazy cool. And they were at Scale, which is really neat too. This is a great platform. This is a great service. They have 7+ Linux distributions to choose from. And one of the things that I think pushes it into the great category isn't just that they have courseware on a topic that we're all kind of fans of. That's a good step. But it's the fact that the people behind it are genuinely enthusiasts themselves about Linux and open source. And so it's reflected in the content that they cover, the way they cover it, and all of that. And they've recently just had an exploding team with people that are going, and you can see some of this on YouTube. They posted the video, I think for non-members as well. I'm a member, so I'm not quite sure which is available to the general public. But they've been growing their team like crazy, new content editors, all the kinds of new talent. Linux Academy is doubling down in 2016 on making it even better service. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to go to linuxacademy.com/unplugged and just check them out. It's a really great fit for our audience. This is a great resource to learn things around Linux, and I think it's really important to have a genuine Linux enthusiastic team behind it. Somebody who's not just out there to just use Linux to make a buck, but somebody who thought, God, I love this. What would be a great way to spread adoption? How can I advocate this platform? Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up this academy. They got together with developers, great educators, and Linux enthusiasts, and they created the Linux Academy. And we're one of the first people to have a great discount for you, and you can take advantage of it at linuxacademy.com/unplugged. They've been working with us for a while now, and I'm really excited to have them on the Linux Action Show. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. And a big thank you, Linux Academy, for sponsoring the Linux Action Show. And congrats on all of the freaking updates and all the new hires as well. Go check out their practice exams. Take advantage of their detailed notes, their comprehensive downloadable study guides. It's super great. linuxacademy.com/unplugged. All right, Mr. Noah, how about I start with some of my stories from Scale? So I got in like Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, and a big shout out to Ryan, who let us borrow his Cadillac so we could shuttle ourselves back from where we'd parked the Lady Jupiter to Pasadena, which was about 20-25 minutes. And he was great. He was also a big help just in general. And we got there. The first thing we wanted to see was Mark Shuttleworth's keynote. This is one of the reasons I got in early so I could cover this, because I thought it was kind of a big deal. They're doing UbiCon. It's sort of like a simultaneous unconference track that they had running at the same time Scale was going on. So you could show up to one place and take advantage of almost two conferences going on at the same time. Mark kicked it off, and he covered a lot of stuff, a lot of ground. He gave about an hour-long keynote and did some Q&A too. And something that really jumped out at me during the Q&A is he's giving his genuine, honest answer. He might put a little bit of a corporate speak on it. I think Mark is sort of naturally more attuned to talk to CTOs and CIOs than he is average users. So I think some of that comes through. But I really always felt like he was giving his honest answers. And so one of the things that he talked about was how PPAs aren't really cutting it. And he identified the problem that OwnCloud has talked a lot about, where OwnCloud advocates don't use OwnCloud from the repos. If you're on Debian, don't use their repo installation of OwnCloud. It's too old. A lot of people are saying this now. And now when you go deploy systems, a lot of people are either adding PPAs or building from source directly. And so Mark talked about this problem as sort of an introduction to snap packages. And so I'm not going to play very much from Mark's keynote, because we just have the whole thing embedded in the show notes if you guys are interested. But I did think maybe I'd play a little bit of it. And he starts setting up this problem with the role of free software and how free software stays competitive these days in the world of app stores and in the world of GitHub and everybody loading their own packages. So I wanted to start with that. And so the title of the talk was Free Software in the Age of App Stores. That was sort of the premise, and I guess Scale kind of asked Mark to talk from that perspective. So he sort of used that as an introduction point, and I'll play a little bit of it for you guys.
Only about half the stuff that they need is stuff that we can curate at the speed of a distribution, right? The other half of the stuff is stuff that's happening on GitHub, right? It's happening at the speed of Git, right? And so in a very interesting way, one of the things that's changed as we move into this era of app stores is just the speed and complexity of software has kind of leveled up. And that happens slowly, so like the frog in the pot of boiling water, right? You may not be aware of that change, it just kind of happens. But think for yourself, how much of what you do on the cloud involves apt-get or yum or something like that, where you're getting curated software from a distro versus building the latest version of something from upstream, from GitHub or from somewhere else. So this is one of the areas that I've been thinking about a lot, right?
So I want to stop there. So he talks about is the essential problem they're now facing is a lot of people when they're deploying systems in the cloud are deploying software from Git, and they're using maybe or a PPA. And so this is sort of how he begins to set up the premise of why we need snap packages. And one of the nice things you got to give it to Mark is he is kind of up there having sort of the CTO, 50,000 foot conversation about this. And he's, obviously going into a presentation he's done a lot before, but at the same time, he also got up on stage, opened up a terminal, showed a snap package build file, and installed packages using Snap Package Manager. So he was doing some real-world demos, and so he talks a little bit about the case for snap packages. I'll play a little bit of that.
So the goal is to be faster because the software is moving faster. The goal is to be easier because, again, if we make it easier for people to share things, then everybody else benefits. Right? I mean, I love this about free software, right? It is special to build stuff and publish it for other people to use, right? Not only does it kind of help you, but just think of what it does for all those other people, right? So we wanted to make it faster, we wanted to make it easier, and we wanted to make it much more secure. We also wanted to make it compatible with classic systems. So what I showed you there was I was on a Snappy system, which is connected to snaps in the store effectively. But I could pop into a classic dimension. And it struck us that we could do the other thing as well, right? You could start with a classic system, a deb-based system, a read-write file system, and you could install snaps as well.
He actually went out of his way to say, we are not trying to replace debs or apt. We look at apt and deb as sort of a lower level dimension where you manage your system, where what the distribution is curated is good enough, and snaps sort of sit on top of that.
And I can't demo that now, but it will be in 1604. This idea that, in fact, when people publish these GitHub speed apps, free software apps, those could go to traditional Ubuntu desktop and server and VM cloud systems just because of the way Snappy's built, right? Since everything is in a box, we can essentially set up a box for it on a classic system just as easily. And so
here's how after watching Mark's demo of how snap packages work, the easiest way I could equate it to you is if you've ever seen an AUR build file, where you have a package build file and you say, you go get this package from this GitHub repo or this FTP directory, and also these dependencies, and put them here. That is, in a lot of ways, what a snap instruction file is. It's more advanced even than the AUR because it also can do like things in containers by default and isolations. So it's not. I'm not saying it's like an AUR ripoff, but essentially it is. Honestly, in a lot of ways, it's some of the best things of the AUR because you can have a generic snap instruction file that says, get a deb file from the repo over here, get this source code from this GitHub repo over here, automatically build it and save it to here. And you can mix and match all this different stuff, and then it's just snap install one command like it is with an AUR, and it goes out and does all of these things for you, and then can do updates and all of that. So once I actually saw Mark open up a snap build file and then install snap packages, I was like, oh, this is another take on the AUR. This is a better take on the AUR. And then I really understood how the Snap Package Manager will actually work with apt-get as well. Like I can actually see it all working together. I'm really, now that I've seen this demo, super, super excited about snap packages. Like crazy excited too, and really glad that you're going to be able to use them on top of traditional Ubuntu installations. I really hope the community starts transitioning to this over PPAs. And I will link to the entire talk in the keynote, the whole keynote, because he talks also about drones and robotics, and he also gets a chance to plug their huge contract that they just landed with AT&T. AT&T has struck a deal with Canonical that will use Canonical's Ubuntu on like all of their cloud servers. So it's a huge win. He talked a little bit about that. Mark, is able to come at this, Noah, from a position of strength now, because there are serious wins under Ubuntu's belt. 70% of the cloud is what he's threw out there. Ubuntu runs on 70% of the cloud servers was the stat he threw out. This win with AT&T. He also several times sort of bragged about the fact that from the best that they can tell, and you and I could probably also say we've noticed the same trend from our Runs Linux segment, any smart car development that's happening out there, and the smart cars themselves are running Ubuntu. As Mark said, and I tend to agree from what we've observed on this show, anytime we've ever seen a smart car computer system, it's been Ubuntu-based. It's something we've talked about. And he said the same thing for a lot of like the drone development systems and things like that. He's now able to come out there, and he doesn't talk about Linux and Ubuntu from a position of having to justify why it exists. He now comes at it from a position of, this is where we're kicking ass, and this is where we think we could start kicking ass in a year from now, so we're sort of aligning our goals this way. And he's also extremely respectful to Fedora and other competing technologies. He even is self-deprecating. He talks about how users, one of his lines is, some users prefer the GNOME desktop and the KDE desktop, and a lot of people really like some traditional desktops, and even some users like Unity. And he kind of waits for the audience to laugh, and he gets it. Everybody gets it. Oh, he just made fun of Unity and that kind of stuff. So he's even poking fun at himself a little bit during the keynote. But I would say the bulk of it was very CTO level, kind of dry. But some of it got down to the nitty-gritty of like using ZFS and going with their new container system and using snap packages. And some of it really seemed like achievable goals, not just pie in the sky. And of course, he talked about convergence and that stuff too, but some of it was really palatable and seemed really close. So I really enjoyed that keynote. And the version that's online is pretty good. You can't really quite see Mark, but that was pretty great. The other really great keynote that you didn't get a chance to catch, that it happened just a little bit before you got into town, was Cory Doctorow's keynote, which completely changed my stance on DRM. Not for the better, in my opinion. It really is kind of a pain in the ass. He gave a great frickin' keynote. And it's funny because I was a little worried that Cory was going to keep it too high level, because he comes in and he starts talking about the difference between science and alchemy. And one of the key differences he talks about, alchemy wasn't peer-reviewed. Alchemy, in a lot of cases, the alchemists would discover something and keep that secret to themselves. It was part of their secret sauce. Whereas science is based on peer review and publishing your findings and challenging those findings publicly, and then rediscovering that, yes, it is in fact true, or no, it needs to be reevaluated. That's the core of science, and that's why we call alchemy the Dark Ages, and we call open public discovery science. And he starts his keynote with that. And then 45 minutes later into the keynote, really 20 minutes into it, but 45 minutes into it, you realize he has brilliantly tied every word he has uttered in the entire keynote all together. And it turns out the comparison of the MPAA and the RAA and all of these companies wrapping their crap up in DRM is really the equivalent to alchemy. And I mean, it is so brilliantly done, Noah. He really shows you why even my previous stance of, well, I don't really mind DRM on things like my Steam Music and my Valve games and my Netflix, because those are ethereal, and if I ever lost them, I wouldn't be that butthurt. But I do care about DRM on things like my pictures or my media that I really want, or my songs I want to own forever, or my movies I want to own forever. No DRM there. That's where I draw the line. And what I really realized is there's two things about DRM that Cory made stand out with me. Number one is, there's that pain in the ass inconvenience factor that Netflix has, and that's really kind of too awful, and he really makes a great case against it. But the other thing about it is fundamentally retarding the sharing of information. It is slowing down the sharing of knowledge and the overall advancement of technology by trying to carve off your little piece of an idea and protect it with DRM. And he makes the case the reason why it's really quite awful is because the technology aspect of DRM never works. We always can circumvent that. Where Absolutely. It's really insidious is it eventually works its way into law. And then what really makes DRM stick is the federal government, or, insert the name of your own government. And he also shows you how essentially the worst parts of the DMCA have spread to the entire world, at least the Western civilization. And he talks about how that's really the long-term harm of DRM. And not the fact that it's a little bit of a pain in the ass for us to get around, but the fact that they can eventually weave themselves into the law. And he cites a lot of previous cases of technology in the past where that's been a huge inhibition.
But I think we've both always been pretty steadfast on the fact that DRM, in any sense of the word, is probably a bad idea. The question becomes, what changes are you going to make, practically speaking, tactically speaking? What changes are you going to make, in your personal life to
He had a really great suggestion. And I wanted to run this past you. So he's working with the EFF again, and he and the EFF are launching Apollo 1201. 1201 is the provision of the DMCA that allows them to like take down our YouTube videos and all that. A mission to eradicate DRM in our lifetime. And what he is hoping is that because so many things are copywritten, and there's so much of this DRM out there now, because really what DRM does is DRM abuses the copyright law. That's how they get you, is they use the copyright law. His theory is, and the EFF's theory is, some really innovative company is going to be working on some great piece of technology that starts to get market adoption, and then somebody is going to use the DMCA and copyright law to shut them down. Mm-hmm. And they are raising funding now to essentially go to war when that happens, to use this to bust the whole DMCA provision all the way open. Not the entire DMCA, they're just going to go after the 1201 provision, which they think they have a shot at, and actually just get this whole thing re-looked at. So they're looking for basically someone to be a sacrificial lamb that will eventually just happen. So here's Corey's solution. Is because he holds up like his IBM ThinkPad, like, Superfish is a thing. Like, it doesn't matter what you buy, you're buying something that's supporting an evil company. It's not practical to say you won't do Netflix because at the end of the day, you got a TV and you want Netflix and chill. Or it's not practical to say you won't ever stream music because sometimes that's just, you don't have any storage and that's what works best for you. It's just in 2016, it's just not possible anymore. What he suggests you do...
Possible, it's highly inconvenient.
Yeah, exactly. What he suggests you do is you look at how much you're spending on these services like Netflix and Spotify, and you make an equal or greater contribution to EFF or insert the name of a foundation or independent broadcasting like ourselves, and so sort of like hedge is what he says is hedge against that. Make your hedge to essentially account for sort of your lazy. It's like a laziness tax, and I thought about that a lot, and I thought, that is actually not only is that a great way to go, but it sort of keeps me in check with how much I'm willing to spend on the other end, because if I have to make an equal or greater contribution, it doubles my cost. And so it sort of puts a natural breaker on how much lockdown, proprietary, copyright-backed crap I'm going to consume. So I'm going to look into that because I think that's actually brilliant. And I think... And also, to self-plug, platforms like Patreon make it possible to finance independent media in ways that were never possible in the past. Organizations like the EFF really have their crap together. And Corey's speech really got me to rethink a lot of this. It kind of has me fired up on this sort of, hedging my nasty DRM habit.
I actually started using a service called VHX, and basically what they do is they go around and collect, a bunch of people make independent documentaries. That's primarily what they're heavy on. There are some independent other films too, but as you can imagine, if you're doing, a drama or something like that, a budget for special effects is not very high if you're an independent content creator. So a lot of it is documentary based, but basically what they do is they go out and they find all of these independently created content and then offer a hub where those people can they facilitate the transaction. So I went on and I have bought a number of movies from them, and basically it's great because you can stream it from their site if you want to, or you can download a no DRM protected, just a regular video file, download it, play it on your Western Digital TV, download as many times as you want. They just add you once you buy that movie, and they're cheap too. They're like $8-9. Once you buy the movie, it's tagged to your account that you own it. You can download it as many times as you want on as many devices as you want and stream it at any time you want. And so I think it's going to take, a lot of people to start putting money and buying content that way for companies and content creators to say, well, rather than, market my movie or video this way, I'll more than happily do this DRM free thing. But I tell you what, I would pay twice or even 3 times the cost of a given movie if I could buy that movie in a DRM free version that I could put on anything, to save the trouble of having to try to defeat the DRM in the first place. And I have a box, Chris, of DVDs that for one reason or another I wasn't at the time able to rip. And so I've spent $20 or $30 on these. I can't even watch them. I don't own a DVD player. I don't. There isn't one in my house. And so the closest I have to that is a disk drive in my desktop that I use.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah, same for me.
And so if I want to watch a movie, the only thing that's connected to my TVs, because I don't have cable, is a Western Digital TV Live. So if it isn't available in a video format or an ISO format or ISO file, I can't watch that movie. And so I just consequently have a box of DVDs I can't watch. And every time I look at it, it pisses me off. And so ideas like this, where we spend a little bit of money, but
the DVD specifically in his talk was brought up. He's like, look at all of the technologies that since they've been introduced 25, 30 years ago, look how far they've evolved. And then look at the DVD. The DVD has literally not changed. The DVD has not changed. It's the same exact thing because there's DRM, it's locked down, it's copywritten. Yeah. Anyways, finish your thought.
What it takes is it takes somebody like you or I, or probably a large majority of our audience, that has an amazing amount of self-control and an amazing amount of vision, because you don't do something like this. You don't willingly find because I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. You're finding yourself, right? You don't willingly impose an additional, somewhat unnecessary, at least not required, financial cost on yourself, unless you're an idealist and you believe in something, very strongly, and you have an amazing amount of self-control and willpower. And if you have those two things, then you have the ability to train yourself to do something like this.
Which I apparently over the years have ebb and flows of, myself.
But it's kind of a linear thing. If you do it 10% of the time, you get 10% of the benefit. If you do it 20% of the time, you get 20% of the benefit.
I do it in bursts, Noah. I do it in bursts, sort of like spurts.
So then in spurts, you're helping the EFF, or you're.
Oh yeah, I think about normalizing it now.
An all or nothing thing. I mean, any part of contributing anything is better than nothing, right?
So we've talked a lot about the ideas of Scale. It's a big Southern California Linux Expo. A lot of people show up. A lot of vendors demo, and so we've talked sort of that aspect. Now I'd like to show you, or at least if you're listening, give you a sense of what it's like to be at Scale. And I want to start with one of my favorite things that Noah and I, like children, honed in on the moment we saw it, and that was giant Jenga blocks.
This is the world's largest Jenga set, and we have managed to somehow pretty much go through the whole stack without knocking it over. It's definitely precarious right now. I think we leave it like that as a testament to our ability to Jenga.
That was a massive Jenga temple. So to show you a little bit more about it, the floor has got a bunch of different exhibitors, and just about everybody you've heard of on this show is there, and a whole bunch of others, including our friends at System 76.
I always talk about how small the Ratel actually is. I just want to give you a second. This is my head, and this is the Ratel Performance. You see that? You see how small that thing is? This is my head. And
now what I like is if you watch Noah's face and Emma's face in the background there, I didn't realize, they apparently got a little uncomfortable.
This is the whole computer right here. Isn't that amazing?
We just looked at each other. That mutual exchange is what?
Yeah, what's he doing? Yeah, right now. That happens. So I've always look at this here. I'll put my head back in there. I like how we've always tried to explain the size of that computer. It is this is no plug. It really is just legitimately a tiny, tiny computer.
What's funny is you've done such an excellent job with the camera angle that you actually can't see the computer at all. So we still have no idea.
Dude, your face. You can too.
You can't. Play it again.
Look right there. What's that? What is that, Noah? What is that?
It's not. Does anyone know how small it is? Can anyone see?
Well, you can get an idea of the size of my head, and the fact that my head the whole idea is that my head covers up the whole computer. You see?
I see.
It's so big. It's so big. My head covers up. You don't see it.
And that's a wide camera angle too. So
yeah, it really is.
No.
Here, let me zoom. I'll zoom and enhance. There, you see? No. Okay. All right. Well, that's sort of. I'm just having fun. We had the GoPro with us, and so we got some fun clips, and that was one of them. So I wanted to show that to you. But there was a booth that honestly I felt a little bad for. I felt like they were surrounded, and they didn't have their biggest defender, their largest advocate. There was one booth where glances were a bit askew.
Wow, there's no Alan Jude at Scale. There's still a free BSD booth. Check it out.
There's nobody visiting the BSD booth.
Go in.
It's our favorite people.
How you guys doing?
JV guys.
So I was kind of giving Alan a hard time. He couldn't make it, but turns out it doesn't require Alan Jude to represent a little free BSD, does it?
I mean, to be honest, it would have been a lot better for Alan to be here, and I was very disappointed to hear that.
You hear that, Alan?
Yeah, they didn't. Did you hear that he had a talk that they didn't take his talk on the ZFS? So
really?
Yeah, so he went, but he got accepted at another place, so they took his talk at another place.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. We stopped by. So we stopped by, and I don't know if you noticed, but I cut out your story back and forth with the with the
Oh
headset.
yeah, well yeah. There's you know, the thing about BSD is they have to ration their users out and their voices because not a whole lot of them. So you know, you got 2 different events at 2 different times. You gotta ration those people out so that you can get them to all the events.
Oh wow! Look at you! Shots fired.
None of us. We're everywhere.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Actually, you know, they have. I think they had. The problem was that Alan's like, I'm going to go where the talk's at. That's what the issue is. I'm just going to go wherever the talk is at. Yeah, that's Denise there from IX Systems, and she was repping the BSD booth. One thing though that I like a lot is they got the headgear there. They got the CD-ROMs are giving out, the pamphlets, and they had punching things. They have some of the most swag out of all the like the Linux booth didn't have that much swag, dude.
No, they didn't. I was really thankful for that copy of PCBSD. I tried to install it, couldn't find anywhere. The disc didn't fit in my USB port. So.
Oh. Look at you. Look at you. Like it. You're bringing it. All right. So that was just a couple of peeks at the booth. We did manage to get some whole floor shots. I was very impressed. I'll warn you, I think there may be some profanity in this next clip, just light profanity, nothing serious. And even if you're an audio listener, you'll get a sense of what it's like to walk the floor of Scale. It's a huge floor. There's a lot going on. And this clip will sort of put you right there in the middle of it.
She helped me. This is a huge ass floor. Holy shit. You're good. You just started the show. Put your head in there. All right. Wow, dude. Look at the size of this freaking floor.
Don't you think this is kind of similar to OSCON?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I think it's a huge deal. This is similar to the size of OSCON, actually. Don't you think that's a huge deal? This is a community-driven event. Wow. Okay, I'm legitimately impressed.
Yeah.
This has been worth the wait. Look, I haven't even heard of some of these companies before, Noah. They got a concession stand, Noah.
They have a massage booth too. Yes, Redis Labs is here. I gotta talk to them.
This is cool. Hey, how's it going, man? How's it going? Here we go. This is better. I was getting. Oh, here we go. What is up? Gnome booth next to the KDE booth. That's how you do it. That's how you do it here at Scale.
You can hear how loud it is there.
Here's the Cody booth.
Oh, good, we got the name right. I still want to call it XPMC. They have their little NVIDIA thing.
They got a freaking couch set up. That's great. They got a couch.
Inflatable. They took a hint from Red Hat.
So many
A lot of
people.
people here. There's a lot of people. Holy crap. Hey, there's Docker. I found Docker. And it just smells like humans in here, though. It's too many humans. It's not my thing. Hey, good man. Look at that. There's Steven, everybody.
Noah.
Hey, it's good to meet you.
And moving on. It's nice to meet you.
How you doing? Hello, hello.
Hey, good to
Don't
see
mind
you
the
again.
camera. I'm just shooting B-roll right now.
Not B-roll. Turned out to be A-roll.
There it is. The booth that makes dreams come true, Noah.
Is this your action
Ubuntu booth.
next action show?
This is very action-oriented right now. How you doing?
I'm Brian.
Hi, Brian. Nice to meet you. I'm pretty damn impressed. Look at this guy over here. Look at this. He must be giving some away. Look at all these people.
All right, Adam. When you hold the balloon, don't touch the part I put in my mouth. It's not that it's unsanitary, it's that I had Chipotle for lunch. But the other advantage is like we're not stepping down the power but one time, right here. And the other cool thing is these accept AC or DC power. So this is our version 1 rack design. And in deployment, what you have is like another rack that's full of car batteries that services 6 of these. It's
the
That's
battery for the
Facebook.
UPS for 6 of these.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, it's backing up these power supplies with DC. If the AC gets interrupted, these switch over to DC. Whereas in a traditional colo, that job has to be handled by a massive, expensive transfer switch in the utility room. Right? If that fails, it drops the load for the whole data center.
That's the Facebook open rack that has like And then, so in a full deployment, they say one rack's got all the gear, another rack's got car batteries.
Yeah, okay.
And they can run it off car
I
batteries.
was looking at that when they originally switched to that. They have the diagrams of how they built
Yeah,
it.
It's pretty cool to see him here actually showing it off too. I kind of want to go down this way. Are you ready?
That way we show
There you are. Hi. Hi.
Yeah.
All right, come on, Ryan. We're gonna go this way. Linux Action Show Frisbee. I just got a great marketing idea.
Dude, here's the thing. Everyone will love them, but the conference organizers will hate you.
Yeah. Silicon Mechanics repping, as always. So, as far as floors goes, this is as big as, like you were saying earlier, this is as big as OSCON, which is a very enterprise-driven commercial event.
Right.
This is a community event.
It is, but notice that you actually get a lot of the commercial guys here
Yeah.
too. But the thing is, if you look at the way that they're presenting in a very community-oriented fashion, which I think is actually really cool.
Yeah, and the other thing I like too is here they seem to be bringing in like experts that actually know the product, so you can ask the hard questions.
Right.
That's nice
Rather
too.
than just the sales guy.
Not just the sales guy, yeah. This has got to be the event to go to if you're out there. This is just the floor alone is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Not to mention the keynotes were great too.
It's a Linux fest on the scale, see what I did there, of a Linux con.
Yeah, Linux Fest at the scale of a con. I think it's pretty neat if you only go to 1 year, other than Linux Fest Northwest.
Yeah,
This will be-
that's number one.
Yeah, but this will be the other one to go to, because this is your other one, if you only go to 1 a year.
So you can get a sense of how intense it is on the ground floor. I mean, it's just super loud, super big. And that was we didn't even get it. You didn't even get an idea of how many people were there. There was way more people than we could even show in that video. It was super cool too. We were walking around constantly saying hi to people and seeing the last shirt and that kind of stuff. Before we go over to story time with Noah, one last story time. So now you guys can see this is the timeline where Noah and I had a chance to meet up. And after Cory Doctorow's,
We had met up prior to that. That's how it come out.
That's where I'm getting. After Cory Doctorow's keynote, right before our lunch meetup, Noah and I, Noah just happened. I'm standing there talking to a viewer who stopped me in the street, and Noah comes around the corner like, "Hey, Noah!"
I landed in it. We knew it was going to be tight. We didn't know it was going to be quite that tight. I landed in LA. I jump in my rental car. I drive. Boom. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem like they care about speeding in California.
Oh my! No! Or Oregon, like where it says 60 miles per hour. Literally everyone is doing 80, and I can guarantee you, you are very when you have a 37-foot vehicle that you are driving down the road, you are very acutely aware of how fast people are going. And in Oregon, where it says it's 55, everybody's doing 70. And in California, where it says it's 60, everybody's doing 80. And they're just first of all, there are way less cops. On the way down to pick up the Lady Jupiter in Washington, we saw 6 cops, okay? 6 cops from La Conner down to Buckley. 6 cops. Once we left Washington State, 3 cops total, the entire trip.
Yeah. So I land, I get in my rental car, drive off. I'm speeding like a madman, and I get to the meetup location about like maybe 45, 50 minutes early, somewhere around there. And it was actually kind of funny because like right about the time that I'm thinking to myself, like, I wonder if I'm at the right spot. Then Angela telegrams me the address, and so I just click on it. It takes me to the place. Then like 10 minutes later, she's like, "Did you find it?" And I'm like, "Yep, I did." So I go looking for parking, and my Nuvi conveniently lets me know that I can actually park for free in the Target parking lot. So I drive about a quarter mile up the road, park in Target, and decide I'm going to go in and pick up some toiletry items that I needed. So I pick up the toiletry items, then decide that I don't really want to walk all the way back to Target's parking lot, so I'll just bring them with me. So I'm walking down the streets of Pasadena with my toothbrush and my deodorant and some chapstick and some hand sanitizer and some other miscellaneous things.
Damn straight.
And I get to the restaurant, and I caught a couple viewers of my own, and so we start talking and chatting. I'm like, well, here's the restaurant. Let's go in. And yeah, I round the corner, and all of a sudden, there's a wild fisher has appeared. A wild hare has
perfect.
appeared.
It was perfect. Yeah. And it was, we've gone a lot of places like Grand Forks, North Dakota, Montana, Spokane, Washington, Self, of course. We've got a lot of places and had meetups, and we always have, what I love about our meetups actually is extremely diverse group of people. All of various interests that all kind of tie in somehow to Linux and open source in some regard. And we always have really incredible conversations.
Some people that are very, very honest.
Yeah. The thing about that is that works good when you got about a dozen or less people.
Which has happened every time.
Yeah. When it gets up to around like 60 people, that's a whole nother scale. Here, check this out.
So the meetup is huge. It's really huge. And I think we're overwhelming the staff.
So it's kind of funny because we said, we'd have about 20 people. No, way more than that showed up. Also, folks from System 76 were there. I got to see and say hi to a whole bunch of really cool people. The food was okay. It was pretty good. The beers were good. That was good. And a lot of really great people. Some really long-time listeners and viewers, and some that, were like, one guy was like 1 week in, and he showed up. Yeah. It was a huge show. A massive, massive group. It was really hard to say hi to everybody.
Meetup got to the point that there were people that were mingling and talking and chatting, and turns out they had no idea what the show was or the meetup or anything like that. They would just happen to be at the restaurant and walked out there and like happened to sit down next to some of the people in the meetup, and then got caught up in the conversation. And then now they're there at
the meetup with us. It was a lot of fun, and it was really cool to see everybody. Got to say hi to literally hundreds of people, and pretty much all the names you hear kicked around in open source were there, and they had talks, or they were covering it, or whatever. I mean, it was a great event. And I left Friday to make it back here so I could do like Coda Radio in this week's shows. So I don't really know what happened after I left. So now you'll have to kind of fill me in, Noah.
So right after we got done, right after we left the meetup, we went back to the expo hall, and that's where we collected all the video clips that you were showing to begin with. That all occurred. Then you took off, and I went obviously back to the expo hall, and I was able to sit down with chat and take a look at the Ubuntu booth and DreamHost, and of course the show floor. And then I got to the ham radio section. And the ham radio section.
This was legit at scale too.
It was crazy. So for all of my, I'll give you a disclaimer. Anyone that's not interested in ham radio and that geekiness, you can just go make yourself a meal here for about 30 seconds. For those of you that are interested, though, their ham booth was insane. They had a VHF talk-in frequency, and so if you wanted directions to the place, or you wanted to talk to different people, you could tune into a VHF frequency and they talk you in. They had a mini like 50-foot tower with a Yagi on the top of it. I believe it was a 3-band Yagi. It was 4020, 20, 40, and 80, I believe. And they had an HF station. They actually registered for an event call. So you could get on the air and chat using the Scale call sign. And had a blast talking to those guys.
Yeah, so if I'm following you, like having an event call means like I could be a ham anywhere in the world and essentially listen to what's going in at Scale?
Exactly. So the thing is, let's say you want to talk, usually it's used in contesting. So for example, you have a contest to see who can make the most radio contacts. Well, if you have, a large group of hams that are gathering together in a specific area, and then everyone wants to call them, you don't necessarily know who's operating the station at a given time, because the calls would change every, couple hours as new operators come on. So the idea of an event call is that call sign then represents Scale 2016, and anyone that logged that contact would get a card in the mail that says you talked to Scale 2016.
So on top of that, you had the Scale organizers that were using ham radios to communicate in what is otherwise a radio nightmare.
Yep, and the thing is, they did two things. Originally they were using cheap Chinese Baofeng, just regular VHF radios, but the conference center actually had an XPR repeater, digital repeater, and so the conference location actually gave them VHF, or I guess it was UHF XPR digital encrypted radios and handed those out to the people. And they actually had an on-site UHF repeater inside of the location. So up at the very top of the building, there's a UHF antenna, and that you, no matter which, because the scale was so big, it actually spanned 2 buildings, and you could talk from building to building with the built-in repeater. It was so cool from a radio standpoint. But then on top of cool, the picture that Chris was just showing you, the Arden or Aredn, AREDN, is basically what would happen if something like SOPA actually ever went through and we lost access to the free internet. Well, what we would do, at least on Hams would, is we would all set up our own individual transceivers, connect them to our computers. We would have our own DNS system, and we would continue to communicate over our own radio system. And because it is very much the bare definition of decentralized, we own the equipment. It's all ours. There is no way to shut that down. As long as I have a radio, I'm quote unquote online.
So this would be mesh networking with ham radios?
Exactly. And so basically what they're doing is they're sending data over internet data over ham radio. There are a couple of gotchas that I wasn't able to get quite 100% definitive answers. One is, because the FCC specifically forbids using codes or ciphers of any kind, my understanding of Part 97 would say that you wouldn't be able to use any type of encryption, which means that all passwords would be transmitted in plain text, which obviously not really going to work, long term. But it was super, super cool to see the presence of ham radio, and and I've been to ham fests that have not had the kind of setups that they had.
Yeah, I was super impressed, and I don't know much. AREDN.org if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, the Amateur Radio...
Radio Emergency Data Center. Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network, which, that's awesome.
It is. It was pretty neat. But the thing that impressed me more than the ham radio setup, although that was pretty cool, was Facebook's Open Rack.
Really?
And here, going from top to bottom, essentially here's how it works. They decided they wanted to take, when you get into very high density computing situations, you're no longer dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4 U servers. It doesn't work like that. They structure it in a totally different way. And so basically what you have they made their own rack. It's slightly wider and slightly taller than a normal network rack.
Yeah, we had it in the video there too.
And basically, they have individual sleds. And the first kind of sled they have is a compute sled. And the compute sled essentially has processors on a big long platter, and they slide that sled in, and now that can do processing. And it's RAM and a processor on it. And then they have storage sleds, which are basically a gigantic tray full of hard drives that do storage. Now, they were telling me that the rack that they brought with them is what they call their lab rack, which is basically it has a couple of compute sleds, a couple of hard drive sleds, and then the power sleds, which you saw in the video, a bunch of different power supplies. They are both AC and DC. So there's a backplane along the back of the rack that provides 120 volts. And if you look carefully in the third picture down, you'll actually see Anderson power poles. And what those are they are 20 amp, 12 volt connectors. It was actually the same thing I used in your previous quiz. And that's actually what's powering the DC part of those power supplies. And so basically they have a rack next to them, and that's filled with, and there they are. There's the Anderson power supplies, and they have essentially a big bank full of batteries, and those are connected with Anderson power poles back into this the server rack. So if the AC ever goes off, the power supplies immediately are providing DC power, and if there's AC, the AC are charging the batteries.
Not only that, Noah. Sorry, I just lost one of my zip ties. Not only that, so it means you're not doing a conversion, right? Which is huge. But the other thing,
well, you are. The power supplies are converting from AC to DC. If they're running just off the battery, then it's.
But hold on, you don't have. So traditionally, the way they would do it is, you don't do it at the rack level. You do it at a data center level. So you don't have this huge piece of equipment that requires monthly maintenance that does it for your entire data center anymore. That's sort of the magic trick here, because that is sort of a piece of infrastructure that it mandates where you build your building, if you're going to even build a building, or if you're going to have to go with something that's already used. Or like it starts the conversation on where you can deploy hardware. And the fact that they can do this at the rack level now means you can be pretty much any room that you can cool, you now can make into a data center.
Right. And basically what they've done, you'll notice on the back of this whole rack is just covered in fans. Now, everything in this rack is toolless. The hard drives come out toolless. The CPUs, RAM are all toolless. Even the fans are toolless. Everything that you touch inside of the rack is colored green. So if it's green, that's where your fingers go. And you manipulate any of the green items to remove things from the rack. So what they were explaining was, anyone can do this. You can train somebody the guy that was giving the presentation was trained that morning on how to unrack and re-rack the entire system. I mean, that's how simple and straightforward it is. When a fan fails, immediately an LED comes on the back of the fan, so that fan is glowing blue, lets the data tech sends an email out, tells the data technician, hey, there's a problem with this fan. All the other fans in the rack immediately go to 100% to compensate for any of the loss in cooling. And the data center technician comes in, toolless, unscrews 2 little thumb screws because it's all toolless, pulls the fan out, puts the new one in.
Now, it's not unusual for, LED lights and fans to kick up to 100%. But remind you, this is an open spec. This is like something that they're putting out. You can build with your own hardware and have these features. It's not a proprietary system.
Right. And the other thing is it is modular and standardized. So, for example, the same processor, the same Atom processor that's being used on their storage sleds is the exact same processor and the exact same build as what's using as the top rack router or top rack switch, excuse me. And so they have the switch at the very top of the rack, which, by the way, all the code is the operating system is Debian, and it is all open and all available to you. You can actually buy from the OEM, the manufacturers. They're basically what they are is their full rack servers that they're using with fiber, inside of it. But you can actually buy the pre-made box for $4,000, and you can download
That's not
the version of
bad.
Debian no, it's not for what you're getting. And you can put the version of Debian that they're using, and you can build all of this stuff. Hands down, the coolest display. It was amazing. Then we took, so after I got done that, and I came down from my high of looking at this open and after the huge disappointment of calling my wife and realizing I can't spend $10,000 on a data center rack, we got in the car and we started heading over to dinner. But on the way there, we saw a BMW with the license plate Linus.
You think?
Now,
do you think it was?
I want to know, does anyone know what car Linus Torvalds drives?
I could see Linus driving a BMW. I could see that, actually. He likes nice things.
So, well, of course he does. He has Linux. But yeah, so we saw that. And, it's funny. I don't catch on to this stuff, but Alex is like a hawk, and he's like, hey, it's Linus Torvalds. And
that's
I'm like,
funny.
Hey, that could be him. I wonder.
I like that you busted out the picture. That's nice.
Yeah, so we took a picture of that. So we got to then we were driving, and a couple of the guys, they said, no, where do you want to go to eat? I said, I want Indian food. And they said, all right, well, the best Indian food is, and I don't remember the name of the town, but it was a long ways away. And so
of course.
Huh?
Of course it was.
Yeah. So a couple of us, Greg and his girlfriend Maddie, and Ryan, and myself, we all got in the car and we started driving. Well, there was a couple other people that were going to come with us, and when they found out how far away it was, because it was like an hour, they're like, "Yeah, we're not going that far for dinner. Sorry." I'm like, "Okay." So we drove like an hour all the way out of town to go get what was amazing Indian food. It was absolutely outstanding. And sat and had a really great conversation about Linux and smartphones and what we think the future is going to be and all sorts of fun stuff. Got done with dinner, went back, slept a little bit, got up the next morning and did more show stuff, talked to people, got out on the floor and shook some hands. Then the next night we went to a Mongolian buffet, but they had one of the most unique takeout policies ever. And their takeout policy was you could take your food that you didn't eat from the buffet, you could take it home for 35 cents an ounce, or 38 cents an ounce, I'm sorry, and they would donate that 38 cents an ounce to a local food bank. Huh. And so it's just enough of an impedance that you won't go out of your way to take more food so that you can take it home. But I know I was like, sure,
yeah, that's great.
Food left over,
yeah.
and here. So it was.
So are these your lunch sessions that get into like the super nerdy conversations where you guys get into some esoteric Linux thing and it goes on for 2 hours, or?
That is exactly what it was. And so I had one of my best friends in the whole world, Alex, was he ended up coming in, and so he had the unfortunate experience of tagging along with me while we were doing this. And so he comes in and he's like, "Hey, could anyone help me upgrade the Android version of my tablet? Because it's
oh no.
Well, it's funny." And he goes, "Which one of you would be the best at it?" And somebody looks up and they're like, "Well, all of us."
Yeah.
we can all do it. I mean, take your pick. Who would you like to upgrade your Android tablet? I think all of us are capable of doing that. But like, no, yeah, it's funny because you start to get, and we had people there. I was talking to people, at the Mongolian place that go like way above and beyond to the point where they do things to the extreme, and not because there's any good reason to do it, just because they want to play with it. And it's funny because it reinforces an idea that, because we all work in IT, I mean, all of us have jobs in this field, and what it reinforces this idea that if you go into IT for the money, you are going to fail. You are going to fail flat on your face, because you cannot compete with the kind of people that I had the pleasure of eating dinner and lunch with. Because these people, they care at their core about this stuff and the future of this stuff. And when they get done getting paid to do this stuff, they go home and start doing it on their own for free because it's so much fun to them. You'll never be able to compete with that.
Right.
So one of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago was encryption and how encryption works. And we talked about having a public key infrastructure. And one of the big problems that we didn't really get into it a couple weeks ago, but it is a problem, is if I have a private key and a public key, and I go to give you my public key, Chris, so that I can sign things with my private key and then send you messages, then you can unencrypt them with my public key and know that that message came from me.
Right.
The problem is, how do I get you my public key, Chris? Because if I just email it to you, what is to stop Rakai, being the bearded mass that he is, snatching my email in the middle, sending his public key to you, and now everything that you encrypt with the
How could I know? How could I know?
Sending to me, you think you're encrypting it with my public key and sending it to me, and in fact, I can't even open it, and he's snatching it now and opening it, and he can read all of your encrypted stuff. So the only truly secure way to do this is with a public key signing party. And so basically what happens is, it doesn't get any more. This is the most unsophisticated, sophisticated thing you've ever seen. A bunch of us geeks all sit in a big circle, and a guy in the center with a with a megaphone goes, Noah Chalaya, DC3, A Alpha, B as in Bravo, 7, 6, 6, 5, E as in Echo, and reads the entire public key. And I sit there and go, hi, everyone. I'm Noah, and this is my key. And then I read it, and everyone writes down and says, oh, yeah, that's what Noah's key was.
Oh, yeah, that sounds right.
They know it's my key because they saw me in person, and I read it, and 50 other people wrote it down. And that's really the only way you can exchange a key. But it's interesting because, again, it's really fun to do. It's fun to do this on your own. It's much more fun to do it with somebody that's not a geek tagging along. You should have seen the look on Alex's face. He walks in, what the heck are they doing?
What are they doing down there?
Yeah, they're just reading random numbers and letters, and everyone is really excited. Oh, I got John's. That's great, John. That's your key. Now we can, it doesn't make any sense to normal people. But a big blast, really fun to be able to exchange that kind of stuff and participate in the key signing party. Then after that, a couple of the hams kind of started gathering together, and we said, let's all go out and grab some dinner and talk about ham radio stuff. And so there's a couple of people there that weren't hams, but the majority of people that came out
I see the gear on the table.
Yeah.
Beer and gear is on the table.
We're ham radio operators, and we started talking about Echolink and how to use that on Linux, and how ham radio has kind of evolved into Linux, and the same kind of people that appeal to Linux will appeal to ham radio and vice versa, and how a lot of the seasoned ham radio operators have become a little out of touch with what the newer generation wants to see happen, and how it doesn't matter because we can do our own thing anyway. And the conversation and the intellect is I can't put it into words, but it's really funny because I think that all of us individually are very, very intelligent people, and we are masters of our own world. So we're big fishes in small ponds, and then you put us all together, and you get to a point where you start. I've never felt so dumb than when I go to these Linux conventions, because you sit across the table from some of these people, and the guy sitting across from you knows everything there is to know about virtual servers. Now, I can set a virtual server up. I can't do anything like this guy can do. And then the guy next to him, he knows everything there is to know about encryption. Now, I encrypt, my files and stuff, but I'm not anything on the level that he is. Each have our own individual area, and it's a great time to say, hey, I had this problem and I wasn't sure how to solve it. You know everything about encryption. How did you solve this? And then, oh yeah, sure. Let me tell you how to fix that. That's the kind of networking and kind of information you're not going to get on a forum.
Of course, you guys get so passionate it led to a bar fight, but that's the story for the feedback segment.
That was all BSD's fault. That had nothing to do with us Linux guys.
I got bad news. It's some real-time follow-up right here on the Linux Action Show. It appears Linus Torvalds drives a Mercedes.
No.
Yeah, here's a tweet. He's got dad of 3 on his license plate, which is kind of adorable.
Somebody else stole his customized license plate.
It's kind of weird, actually. Why would somebody else? That's weird, right? Maybe it's Linus something else. I don't know.
I guess there could be more than one person with the name Linus. Anyway, Scale, fantastic event, a ton of fun. And for me, the conference is like 20% of the appeal and the interest, and the community aspect and the conversations is the other 80% of the reason why I have so much fun. Definitely will. Sounds like we're definitely going to be back there next year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, one of the things to really kind of realize if you haven't been to an event like this before is you might not even be a big social person and don't go to like a lot of social things. But I'll tell you, there is something extremely gratifying about you go somewhere and everybody speaks your language. And the language it's just technology, and it's open source, and it's Linux. And that is sort of the commonality that everybody shares of different ages, races, sexes, everything. There was I believe an 11-year-old who gave a talk at Scale. I mean, there's a whole range there, and we're all talking about the same things. We're all excited about the same things, and there's something special about sitting down at a table of people, and all of you could debate the finer aspects of the thing that you love about Linux or are curious about, and that's a neat treat, because a lot of times, maybe you don't really get to have that experience. Just a couple other things, like maybe if you want some homework, I did link a couple of nice talks. The audio was pretty rough on the Scale live stream. And some of these, they start out with no audio for a few minutes, and then if you jump ahead, the audio's there. But 4 years in the trenches with Linux, QEMU, and libvirt. I thought that might be of interest to some of you, so I have a link to that talk. From sysadmin to Netflix SRE, a really interesting talk about Linux and Netflix. And essential Linux security. Sort of speaks for itself. I have links to those talks in the show notes that were taken from basically like a Google Hangouts live stream of the Scale event. Now, of course, we're all done with Scale, and we are already starting to turn our attention to Linux Fest Northwest. And so if you didn't get a chance to go to Scale, you are always welcome to join us at Linux Fest Northwest 2016 in April, which we'll be telling you more about that soon. But you can mark that on your calendars. Going to be a big show, Noah. All right, so it was good to see everybody there. Thanks for everybody who made it to the meetup, and big recommendation to attend Scale. If you get a chance next year, you probably get a chance to say hi to us. And that's the Linux Action Show stories from the floor of Scale 14. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. But before we get out of here, I want to thank our segment sponsor and take a few calls from the live stream over jblive.tv. Shout out to System76, creators of machines born to run Linux. If you want to make a solid recommendation to somebody to go switch to Linux and you don't want them to hassle with hardware issues or strange updates that break video things or whatever it might be, point them at System76, and when they make their purchase, have them mention the Linux Action Show. Friends, if you're ready for a killer machine that has been refined, and built here in the U.S., look at the Oryx Pro. Go design one from System76. They have a limited time $50 off. I had a chance to play with one of their early production units. Aluminum alloy construction, extremely thin for what you get in this thing. NVIDIA GeForce GPUs, beautiful display, 64 gigabytes of RAM. It's a really nice laptop. They got great desktops, too. These machines are killer Linux rigs, and they work hassle-free. I've been a customer for nearly a decade. System76.com. And tell them the Linux Action Show sent ya. All right, Noah, so let's throw caution to the wind, sir. Are you ready? I'm going to bring Joey on. I'm dialing him up right now using Noah's Asterisk phone system. And Joey's...
I'm sorry. There is no call parked on that extension. Please try again.
Now, Noah. Noah.
Joey hung up.
Joey hung up on us. All right, well, let's go to a guy with 60 Nux. You ready? I'm rolling the dice. Here we go. A guy with 60 Nux. Are you there? Hello, sir.
I am. How are you guys doing?
Good. Welcome to Linux Action Show. Now, tell us your name, and can you tell us where these 60 Nux are?
My name is Josh, and pretty much, so I work in a nonprofit, so we work in a lot of third world countries in Central, South America, Africa, and Asia, so ranging anywhere from like Mexico to Burkina Faso.
What kind of jobs do these 60 Nux? Are they all running Linux? So we were having, for the rest of the audience that doesn't know, on the pre-show, we were having a conversation about how we've run into like odd issues with Nux. And so Josh here is like, hey, I got 60 Nux in production. Are they all Linux, Josh?
So the 60 we have out there now are, the base operating system they are not Linux. What we have on over half of them is actually Server 2012, which technically the NUCs don't support.
Nice.
But if you use the Windows 8 network driver, it works fine. So we have that running Hyper-V, and that's mainly, as we were talking about in the chat room, was a lot of the IT talent we have in those countries. So they're not familiar at all with Linux, don't even know what it is, but they all know Windows. So
Josh, you got a mission now, Josh. So what you got to do, here's what I want you to do, Josh, is I want you to call us back next week and tell me how many of those guys you switched to Linux, okay? Just call us back next Sunday.
Don't worry. Now, that's just the base operating system, because I need them to do a couple things, like if I need to reboot something I can't reach. The virtual machines on there I have running, one of them is running, I have Ubuntu 14.04 LTS that's running OMD. I don't know if you guys seen that before, OMD, Open Monitoring. And then I have another one that's running CentOS, running as a SaltStack Citrix server. So, like,
so the NUCs have enough horsepower to have Windows be the virtualizer and then do a fair amount of work in these Linux VMs?
It hasn't even scoffed at all. It's been perfectly fine. No issues at all.
Cool. Well, Josh, thanks for calling in, and keep tuning in. Let us know how it goes. That was pretty cool. All right, so let's bring on a first-timer to the show. That'd be fun. All right, I'm dialing up our first-timer. Noah, are you ready? I feel like I need like a little theme, like when I place the call. You know? Okay.
I am sorry. There is no call parked on that extension.
Okay.
Please try again.
Now, Noah, I'm starting to think that 71's never got anybody there. Starting to think. That was pretty cool. That's fun to take calls. We're still experimenting.
This is what you would call an open source work in progress. So it's not going to be right the first time. We're still honing in. We are patching and fixing bugs.
Well, there you go. Well, Josh was able to get through, so that's pretty exciting. So we've actually, what we're experimenting with, and you can help us test it because it's going to take us a little work, is a Linux-powered live call system with a whole fancy 1-800 number and everything that Noah's put together. And you can help us work the kinks out. Let's try it again. We'll give it one more try. Oh, no, you ready, Noah? This should be Joey calling back with hopefully a scale update. I'm dialing it in, Noah.
There we go.
Hey,
Hi,
Joey, are you there?
Yeah.
Well, hello, sir. I'm glad you're able to stick with us and make it to the show. So, Joey, what were your impressions of Scale? I think you were the one that made it to Scale, right?
Yeah, and it was my. I have a stutter. So bear with me.
Oh, Joey!
Joey! Hi, Joey,
what?
the ham.
Joey, the ham guy. We met Joey.
Yeah. Hey, Joey.
Yeah. Joey, it was cool to meet you it was at the meetup that I met you, I think, but I don't remember now.
Yeah, at the meetup.
Yeah, it was pretty. So, what did you think? Did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah. I enjoyed it so much. It was my very first Linux conf.
Yeah, or like big event. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, I've been to other conferences, but not Linux ones. And at the end, I was beat. It took my body to its end. So it was.
But hey, I think none of us got sick actually, which is pretty good. So that's
hand sanitizer. Joey, did you use hand sanitizer?
Yeah, you got to do that.
Well, actually, I did though.
Oh, you did?
I got sick. Yeah.
Oh no.
That's too bad. Yeah, Noah and I were on top of that. We both brought our hand sanitizer, so yeah. Well, Joey, thanks for calling in, and it was really cool to see you at Scale too. I hope, would you go to the next one and say hi to us at the next Scale?
Oh yeah, I'll be there. It'll be I think local to me, so. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's always perfect. All right, Joy, we'll have a good one. Thanks for calling in. All right, so we'll check in with producer Rotten Corpse and see if we have anybody else on the line, but that was pretty neat. Now, we do have, we were going to read a whole slew of emails on the show, too. We have a whole bunch, but we wanted a chance to try out the call system. We'll try one more call before we get out of here. New timer calling into the show. First-time caller, first-time listener. Wait, hold on, let me do the introduction. All right, first-timer, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hello, sir. Welcome to the Linux Action Show. It's good to hear from a first-timer. What's your name?
Name is Mark. I go by Cybonic.
You should give a shout out in the chat room. So Cybonic, is this like your first live show ever, your first Linux action show? Give me some perspective and give me the hard truth what you think so far.
I totally love what you guys are doing. I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like this.
Oh,
And
really? Well, that's high praise. Hey-oh. We did it, Noah. We did it.
Well, that's good.
I'm definitely gonna continue to be a fan. I've been listening to your show since since 2000, and oh god, it's been actually been about 3 years. I first somehow found the Jupiter Broadcasting app, and that's kind of how I started, just listening to your show.
That's cool. And so, in 3 years, you were like, after 3 years, you were like, I think I'll check out a live show. I'll just tune in on Sunday and see what's up.
Yeah, well, that went from that to, I need to pay this more attention. This is actually good stuff, and went from that to listen to all kinds of other shows, BSC Now and some of the other shows that you have.
Yeah, you watch out for those BSD Now guys. They'll get you curious. You got to be careful. You You stick with the Linux Action Show, and then watch the BSD Now. Because sometimes you start talking about ZFS and then snapshots. I just get all kind of distracted. Well, so any other tips or advice for your Linux Action Show before we let you go?
I think you guys are on point with what you guys are doing. You guys just need to continue to do it. I myself, I'm just going to find more ways to get people to buy into Linux, and open source as a whole.
Yeah, it is pretty cool to have something to be passionate about like that, and something that a lot of people don't know about. And you find if you get the right audience, you can actually strike some curiosity there and get some people to make a switch. I've actually had some success in a lot of cases that you would think, why would they care? But honestly, people just want to get their work done and they don't want to get jerked around. And sometimes Linux is the perfect solution. If you approach them from those aspects, sometimes you can sell just about anybody. Well, thanks for calling in. I'm glad you are tuned in for your first show and hope to see you back here next Sunday. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right. Hung up on his face, Noah. That guy, what a jerk, huh? No, that's really cool. All right, so I think we'll cut it off there just because it's a super long show, but we'll keep refining this, and we'd love to have you guys help us. So join us at a live show. We do it on Sundays, on the Shunday. It's Sunday Linux services at jblive.tv. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get that converted to your local time zone, and we hang out. The show goes on forever, too. So if you think the edited release version is long, you should see how damn long the live show is. It's ridiculous. Noah, is there anything else you want to cover before we get out of here for this week?
I actually had a long story I wanted to No, I'm just kidding. Check out on Twitter. Today I posted. I haven't been posting horrible pictures. Usually I have bad networking things that have occurred. Unfortunately, they've been so bad this week. I haven't really. It's not been amusing enough.
So what did happen to your face?
I got into a fight with an Apple employee.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. He hit you with his MacBook Air, didn't he? Those things are sharp.
I was like, no, listen, bro, I'm an Android all the way. And he's like, no, listen, we're going to. And so we got into it and we wrestled a little bit, and he picked up an iMac and tried to smash it.
Oh, an iMac, yeah.
Yeah, and the whole iMac smashed, but I did get a little gash on my head.
So you broke the iMac?
I did. My head just plowed right through it, and I'm like, oh, Linux.
I thought it was a MacBook.
No. It was definitely an iMac. It was big, 27-inch guy.
Whoa, man, you're buff. You're really buff. No, that story makes you sound really buff.
I'm working on those finger push-ups.
So it looks like by following the Slack thread there, all of the issues with the phone system are now fixed as we're done, as we wrap up. So that's good.
Yeah, well, Chris, if the only time we did this maybe wasn't as we were doing a live show, we could set a day aside.
I do believe it was brought up now, in my defense, I believe it was brought up on Thursday. So
you did.
But you know what? Damn impressive. Worked. No, it worked. Yeah. And Linux powered. So that's pretty cool too. Got to give credit there. Even if it meant we hung up on people a couple of times. That's fine.
Well, they hung up on us technically. But.
Okay. Oh, okay. They just didn't want to talk to Rotten again. You can follow me on Twitter at ChrisALS. You can follow him on Twitter at Kernel Linux. You can follow the network at Jupiter Signal. We'll probably have, hopefully in the next few weeks, some rover logs come out from my journey. I got a ton of great content on the way down, at Scale and the way home from Scale, and I'll be releasing those as rover logs as time permits. But since I've been back, I've been too busy catching up. Haven't had a chance to edit those yet. But I also would love to have your input, your feedback, your story suggestions, your open source projects we should talk about. linuxactionshow.reddit.com, your emails, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact. Also, if you're not, check out Linux Unplugged. Really good show. Noah hosted one in my absence a couple of weeks ago, and we've had just really, I mean, that show has just been growing like crazy. So people are really enjoying it, and we have a virtual lug in there that we get to really cut through a lot of Linux issues that Linux users care a lot about. It's really a show by Linux users for Linux users.
It's community-based.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so if you haven't listened for a while, check out Linux Unplugged. We do that show on Tuesdays, and it's out every single week. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next week. Also, some big changes here in the studio, Noah, big changes. Yep. First of all, we need to talk, but second of all, I'm going to tell you about the big changes. Hold on a second. Stop the show.
Okay.
Stop. We got to talk about something important here. So, I was pretty clear. I mean, I thought I was pretty clear about a policy I had in the JB1 studio about no zip ties.
No.
No, I ask you, what is it? No, can you just take a guess what I have in my hand right here, right now? Can you just take a guess what I have right here?
Gee, those look to be like plastic devices in a long spring-like fashion.
Yeah. Zip ties, Noah. Just the three I had to cut today. So let's go through it. So does it Noah? So I have when we set up the JB1 studio.
Can we get the backstory
I'm giving the backstory.
No, okay. So you're going to start with the part where you railed Rakai and I in the air for 3 different shows before this happened, right? You're going to start there.
No, I'm going to start a step before that. I'm going to talk about how when we were building the new studio more than 2 years ago, I said, listen, there's one rule with this new studio. One rule, no GD zip ties. I
wasn't there for that.
I had to. But you knew about the rule, Noah. You knew there was a rule. So here's the thing. Here's the thing, Noah. I suffered through zip ties in data centers for more than 10 years. Done with zip ties, right? So I say no zip ties in the new studio. And for the first iteration, so what Noah likes to do is he comes in here, he gets inspired, and he tidies things up. And for the first iteration, the first go-through, we used Velcro ties. Guess what? Happy camper here. Happy camper. Loved it. However, of course,
we ran out and Lowe's didn't have any more.
And we tore apart the studio for a Linux Fest and all that kind of stuff. So it gets pretty bad in here. And these guys were talking big about how, we're going to tear apart your studio to save Linux Fest, but trust us, we'll build it. We'll put it right back together. Never happened. It was a disaster. It was a disaster.
No, not true. That's so unfair. I spent like the first 3 hours of the after party or the after Linux Fest party thing in the studio putting everything back, and I was missing one XLR cable when I got done. One. That's not when this happened. This happened after Linux Fest.
Okay. All right. So something like that. So his version of Absolutely Perfect and mine were slightly different. And I get in here and it's a disaster. And so Noah takes charge, and he decides to tidy the whole studio. I don't know where I was. I was probably off, doing something super important. And so let me give you an example. These are just the zip ties that I ran into today, and I want to sort of set this up for you. This was a year ago. He did this almost a year ago, and I'm still today cutting through zip ties. So here's if you notice, the power is zip tied to the post, and then the cord that's attached to that same power brick, which is less than half an inch away, also zip tied. Here's another one of my favorite. We have a clamp to hold wires in, and then the wires are zip tied to the clamp, and then the wires just outside the clamp are also zip tied, not with one zip tie, but 2 zip ties. Here's another favorite angle of it. You can see the situation here where I'm trying to just move some cables around. Here's another good one. DVI cable around. Zip tie it, everybody. Zip tie it. You need to plug it in? Too bad. Now here's what happens. You're like, geez, that looks tidy, Chris. That's nice. That's swell. Here's actually what happens. See, a lot of people come in and out of this studio, and let me tell you about it. A little bit of fact about Jupiter Broadcasting. 1 pair of scissors. 1 pair. And guess what?
No,
every clown
hey,
up in this biz is using the scissors. They're all always using the scissors, Noah. And so guess what? I can never find the scissors. So what should be a 30-second task turns into a 15-minute task while I'm searching the entire studio for scissors. And guess whose name I'm cussing? Guess whose name I'm cussing the whole time? That damn Noah, if I didn't have to have gone, this would have been a 30-second job. Now it's a 15-minute job, blah, 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 blah. And every time. So this morning, I came in early. I came in early this morning, Noah, on a Sunday morning. On the day of rest, Noah, I came in early. On Blue Sunday, I came in early because I knew I would have to be cutting. I knew, Noah, I'd have to be cutting zip ties. And guess what?
You still ran out of time?
Well, we're still on time because I came in early.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Well,
so that's a long way of saying, long story short, TLDR, I no longer have the bonobo up on the table. I went back to the touchscreen to kind of cut down on the noise.
Okay, so in my defense, first of all, I had no interest of destroying your studio. The only reason that we went to the extreme zip tie length was because you not only like berailed Rikai and I on the air on 3 different shows, but you went to Twitter then and took pictures, and you're like, "Oh, these Jackenheimers are gonna clean up my studio. Look at the mess they left on the floor." Which, by the way, none of that was zip tied. And so then Rikai and I went to Rikai doesn't go anywhere, but I went to Lowe's to go get Velcro ties, which they did not have any. So I got zip ties and came back, and I actually told Rikai as I was zip tying, like everyone I pulled, you can ask him about this. I'm like, this is a bad idea. Zip. He's not gonna like this if he ever has to undo this. Zip. I think this may cause problems. Zip. Hey, this cable isn't long enough. Let's use this clamp to go to the window, and then we can run the cable through it and zip tie to that. Zip. This is probably a bad idea. Zip. I don't think this is great. Like everyone, I was like, this is a horrible idea. I think this is eventually going to get me in trouble. But
it was tidy for like 2 weeks. It was tidy as hell.
Well, I think it was more.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay. You know what? Lesson learned is just have, you know what? A studio should just have a roll of Velcro.